Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 13 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as the legendary Orochimaru with the Mad Scientist system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 341, Coercion and Manipulation were tactics that both the original Orochimaru and the current Orochimaru excelled at. However, in the original work, Orochimaru's strength was limited, and he could, at best, threaten smaller villages. Now, with his newfound power, Orochimaru could even threaten the great shinobi villages. Mei was furious upon hearing his words. She was intelligent enough to recognize the vast disparity in strength between herself and Orochimaru. If Orochimaru were to act, there was no scenario in which she could defeat him. The only outcomes would be her meaningless death and an enraged Orochimaru unleashing devastation on Kirigakure. She had no doubts that Orochimaru would carry out his threats. Kirigakure's current situation was precarious. Most of their forces were stationed on the front lines, and the remaining ninjas in the village were hardly capable of defending against an attack. Moreover, Orochimaru had his own army of reanimated shinobi. Among the reports Mei had received from the 7 ninja swordsmen, there were at least 3 Kage-level combatants under Orochimaru's command. If such individuals were unleashed on the village, the ninja clans of Kirigakure would. Damn it! Why are you doing this? Why? Mei's voice trembled with despair. This was the suffocating pressure brought by absolute power. And Orochimaru knew her well enough to exploit her weaknesses. He knew that, despite Kirigakure's flaws, she deeply cared for the village and could never abandon it. I told you, this is for peace, Orochimaru said, his tone calm as he walked ahead, with Kabuto following closely behind. Initially, I didn't plan on this, but after meeting you, I decided otherwise. He glanced back at her. In other words, you're the only one who can save Kirigakure now. Mei trailed behind him, her mind racing. At only 18 or 19 years old, she had no initial interest in becoming Mizukage. Like Tsunade before her, she had little desire to take on such a burden. But if becoming Mizukage meant saving the village. What exactly do you want me to do? She asked cautiously. I'll say this up front, I won't do anything that would harm my village. Relax, Orochimaru replied casually. I have no interest in harming your village. With Mei reluctantly leading the way, Orochimaru and Kabuto approached the outskirts of Kirigakure village. Shrouded in thick mist year-round, Kirigakure was isolated from the outside world. After taking control of the 4th Mizukage, Obito's cruel regime plunged the village into chaos, launching unnecessary wars and persecuting those with Kekkai Genkai. For Mei to have survived and thrived under such conditions was a testament to her strength and capability. The environment here isn't exactly ideal, Orochimaru muttered as they walked. The perpetual mist left the village humid and damp. For someone like Mei, a master of water release, this wasn't a problem. But most people needed special clothing to tolerate the humidity. When it comes to the environment, it's naturally not as pleasant as Konoha, Terumi Mei remarked, casting a sharp glance at him. Orochimaru, I hope you'll keep your promise. We'll see how you perform, Orochimaru replied with a sly smile, handing her a kunai marked with his Flying Thunder God seal. Mei hesitated, glaring at him before taking the kunai and heading toward the village. To her, everything Orochimaru was forcing her to do felt like a betrayal of her home. The thought made her stomach turn. But what choice did she have? If Orochimaru decided to attack, Kirigakure would be defenseless. The 4th Mizukage, Yagura, was far from reliable, and even at his peak, he wouldn't stand a chance against Orochimaru's army of Kage-level reanimated shinobi. Following Orochimaru's instructions, Mei returned to her residence. Moments later, Orochimaru and Kabuto appeared in her room, using the Flying Thunder God technique. Her private quarters were simple and clean, with a faint, pleasant fragrance lingering in the air. Now, Orochimaru said, surveying the room briefly before turning to her, tell me where your Mizukage is. The 4th Mizukage, Yagura, appeared much younger than his actual age. With green hair, striking purple eyes, and a noticeable scar beneath his left eye, Yagura carried himself with an air of quiet authority. He wielded a hooked staff adorned with a green flower, a weapon uniquely his own. Despite his youthful appearance, Yagura's knowledge of specialized ninjutsu and his ability to govern Kiridikure proved that he was no mere child. Orochimaru observed him from the roof of a tall building, watching as Yagura moved through the mist-covered streets below. Narrowing his eyes, Orochimaru smirked slightly. "Just as I thought." "What is it? Are you going to?" "You two stay here," Orochimaru interrupted, cutting off Mei. Before she could question him further, Orochimaru leapt from the rooftop, bypassing the village's defenses with the Flying Thunder God technique. Rather than approach Yagura directly, he reappeared inside a dimly lit hut near the Mizuki's office. The room was dark, and in the corner sat Obito, his whirlpool-patterned mask partially obscured by shadows. "Orochimaru, what are you doing here?" Obito asked, his voice calm but laced with surprise. What surprised him wasn't Orochimaru's presence in Kiridikure, it was the fact that Orochimaru had sought him out immediately upon arrival. "I have something to discuss with you," Orochimaru said directly. "Couldn't you have relayed it through Zetsu?" Obito asked. Orochimaru smiled faintly. "No, this isn't something Zetsu can know about." Hearing this, Obito's posture straightened slightly. His expression, though hidden behind his mask, turned serious. Orochimaru approaching him in secret, without Zetsu's knowledge? This was clearly something significant. "What is it?" Obito asked, his tone cautious. "You're aware of my relationship with Tsunade, correct?" Orochimaru began. "Of course," Obito replied without hesitation. If not for Orochimaru's ties to Konoha's leadership, Obito might have attacked the village much sooner. Orochimaru's golden eyes gleamed. "I spoke to Tsunade and uncovered the reasons behind your condition." "So what?" Obito said coldly, narrowing his eyes. He wasn't surprised that Orochimaru had learned about him. With Tsunade as Hokage and access to Konoha's intelligence, it would have been easy for Orochimaru to piece things together. "I want you to work for me," Orochimaru said bluntly, "and in return, I'll bring Rin back to life." Obito froze, his body stiffening. "Bring Rin back to life? Are you joking?" "Why would I joke about something like this?" Orochimaru countered. "Was my resurrection of Nawaki not proof enough of my capabilities?" "Don't think I don't know how your resurrection technique works," Obito retorted. "It requires living human cells. You can't bring someone back without a clone to act as a vessel." Orochimaru chuckled. "You've done your research, but you still underestimate me." His voice dropped slightly, taking on a more sinister tone. "Tell me, Obito. What if I told you I could create a Rin from nothing?" Chapter 342, The Sharingan is the ultimate representation of spiritual power. The Mangekyo Sharingan takes this a step further, surpassing the ordinary Sharingan with its heightened abilities. So, after awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, Obito's mind became significantly sharper than before. Orochimaru didn't need to beat around the bush when speaking to him now. Obito and Zetsu had personally witnessed Orochimaru's resurrection of Nawaki, so it was only natural that they had secretly investigated him afterward. However, Orochimaru was meticulous in protecting his research data. No matter how much they investigated, they could only uncover surface-level information. Thus, Obito and Zetsu could only speculate about the extent of Orochimaru's resurrection capabilities. It was true that his clones required living human cells to grow. It was also true that Edo Tensei required an identical yet soulless clone to revive the dead. There was never a rule stating that the vessel had to be identical in size to the original body. Not only that, gender, physique, and even overall build didn't matter. Since Edo Tensei was performed by a third party, its requirements for vessels were stricter than Orochimaru's personal reincarnation technique. But that didn't mean a clone was necessary. And more importantly, when Orochimaru suggested creating a completely new Rin from scratch, Obito's first reaction was disbelief. Creating someone out of thin air? Even the legendary Sage of Six Paths couldn't achieve that level of yin-yang release, Obito scoffed. The Rinnegan was the Sage of Six Paths' legendary eye technique. Obito knew that Orochimaru had a deep understanding of the Rinnegan, so he didn't hold back in his response. Yin-Yang release was the power that could breathe life into objects, allowing for creation and restoration. But among all known users, the strongest practitioners weren't Kagaya Otsutsuki or even Six Paths Madara. The true masters were Hagoromo Otsutsuki, Himura Otsutsuki, and Naruto Uzumaki after receiving chakra from all nine-tailed beasts. Their yin-yang release wasn't limited to simple healing. It could restore the vitality of those near death, as seen when Naruto saved Might Guy after opening the 8th gate. It could even recreate lost human organs, like how Naruto restored Kakashi's missing eye. However, even the Sage of Six Paths could only reshape pre-existing forms. To create a fully formed human from nothing? That was beyond even his capabilities. Otherwise, he wouldn't have allowed himself to die of old age. Orochimaru remained unfazed by Obito's skepticism. "You're right," he admitted with a casual shrug. "Yin-Yang release alone isn't enough to create a human body. But you should know by now that I've never relied on ninjutsu." Obito's expression darkened. "What are you implying?" "I rely on science," Orochimaru said smoothly. "With my current level of research, creating a body identical to Rin's is just a matter of time. If you've ever set foot in my lab, you wouldn't doubt me." Obito fell silent. "You're saying you can really bring Rin back?" His voice was quieter now. A part of him had always considered the possibility of asking Orochimaru to help resurrect Rin. But his hatred, his conviction in the world's cruelty, had buried that thought deep within him. Besides, there was no guarantee that Orochimaru would even agree to help. Yet now, Orochimaru had sought him out first. Orochimaru smiled. "I have no reason to lie to you. And if you pledge your loyalty to me, I'll even share certain secrets you've never known before." Obito clenched his fists. Orochimaru continued, "Think it over. I'll be in Kirigakure for the next few days. When you've made your decision, come find me." Without waiting for a response, Orochimaru disappeared from the dimly lit room. Reappearing via Flying Thunder God, Orochimaru landed back on the rooftop where Mei and Kabuto were waiting. He said nothing about his meeting with Obito. Instead, he instructed Mei to find them a hidden guest room, then settled in with Kabuto. Kirigakure was sparsely populated with shinobi at the moment, and thanks to the Flying Thunder God's precision, no one could detect their movements. Could Orochimaru actually sway the darkened Obito? It seemed unbelievable at first, but it wasn't impossible. No matter how fearsome or powerful Obito had become, to Orochimaru, he was still just a boy. A boy who had a weakness. And Orochimaru had the perfect leverage. For Uchiha Obito, bringing Rin back to life was far more enticing than creating an illusionary world in the infinite Tsukuyomi. That's why Orochimaru wasn't worried about Obito refusing. Sure enough, within a day, Obito sought him out in Kirigakure. But he had one condition. Until Rin was successfully resurrected, he would only maintain a cooperative relationship with Orochimaru. Only after she was revived would he fully submit as a subordinate. Orochimaru, of course, had no reason to refuse. With their mutual agreement in place, the next steps unfolded quickly. Under their joint manipulation, the fourth Mizukage, Yagura, issued an order to halt the war. Once all the remaining Kirigakure shinobi had returned, Yagura publicly passed the title of Mizukage to Mei. The decision shocked everyone. Even Mei herself was caught completely off guard. She wasn't even 20 years old yet, how could she possibly be Mizukage? After all, even in the original timeline, when Minato became Hokage in his 20s, many including Danzo argued that he was too young and inexperienced for the position. And Minato had a much stronger record of military achievements. But Mei? She was even younger than Minato at the time of his appointment. She was a woman, a rarity among Kage. And worst of all, she hadn't even made significant military contributions yet. So what qualified her to be Mizukage? That question burned in Mei's mind. Storming into Orochimaru's guest room, she shoved the door open without hesitation. "Orochimaru, this was your doing, wasn't it?" she demanded. She was still dressed in her signature blue attire, her expression filled with disbelief. Yagura's sudden 180-degree shift in attitude, along with his immediate decision to name her his successor, was simply too suspicious. If Orochimaru wasn't involved, she'd never believe it. Across the room, Orochimaru sat calmly at the table, sipping tea. Hearing her accusation, he chuckled lightly. "If you don't want others to discover my presence," he mused, "you should lower your voice and close the door." Mei stiffened. After a brief hesitation, she complied, shutting the door behind her before stepping inside. "Damn it!" she muttered under her breath. What the hell happened? Why did Yagura suddenly hand over his position to me? He wasn't like this before. Orochimaru set his tea down, giving her a lazy smile. "It's nothing complicated," he said smoothly. "The root of your village's chaos was your Mizukage. So," he tilted his head slightly, "I simply used the Mangekyo Sharingan to control him and made him hand over the position. That's all." Mei's eyes widened in disbelief. "Jinjutsu? You're telling me you used Jinjutsu on Yagura?" Orochimaru hummed, taking another sip of tea. "That's impossible," Mei protested. "Yagura, how could he fall under a Jinjutsu?" Chapter 343, Yagura is the perfect Three-Tails Jinchuriki. How could he possibly be trapped in a Jinjutsu? This was the thought racing through Terumi Mei's mind. Indeed, under normal circumstances, it was impossible for a perfect Jinchuriki to be placed under Jinjutsu. The fundamental principle of Jinjutsu was to disrupt the target's chakra flow, but a Jinchuriki had a tailed beast inside them. If the tailed beast had a good relationship with its host, it could immediately regulate their chakra flow, rendering Jinjutsu completely ineffective. Just like when Killer Bee easily countered Sasuke's Sharingan illusions in the original timeline. By this logic, Yagura should have been immune to Jinjutsu. And that's precisely why he was able to remain controlled for so long without anyone suspecting a thing. Because no one even considered the possibility that a perfect Jinchuriki like Yagura could be placed under Jinjutsu in the first place. Orochimaru smiled knowingly. Under normal circumstances, that would be true, he admitted. But what if the tailed beast is placed under Jinjutsu as well? He didn't elaborate further. But the implication was clear. As long as both the Jinchuriki and the tailed beast were simultaneously subdued, they could both be placed under Jinjutsu. That was exactly how Obito had controlled Yagura. However, Obito's ability to phase through attacks was a defensive technique. It gave him an advantage in evasion but not in direct combat. So, when it came to subduing a Kage-level Jinchuriki like Yagura, Obito had needed Nagato's help. Of course, Orochimaru had no intention of revealing that part of the story. Mei furrowed her brows. "You're saying, you controlled both Yagura and the Three Tails?" It sounded ridiculous, but she couldn't ignore the logic. Suppressing a tailed beast was possible with certain sealing techniques. But controlling one? That could only be achieved through wood release or the Sharingan. And Orochimaru had both. Combined with his immense combat prowess, it wasn't impossible. Moreover, if Orochimaru even knew about Yagura's Jinchuriki status, didn't that prove he had already fought and subdued him? Fine, she exhaled. She didn't want to believe it, but she couldn't deny the possibility either. Orochimaru smirked. "Well then, if there's nothing else," he stretched lazily, "you should probably get back to handling your duties. Managing an entire village won't be easy." Mei sighed in exasperation. She got up to leave, but hesitated at the door. "Orochimaru, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you help Kirigakure?" She turned slightly, her emerald eyes locked onto him. "Was it really just for peace? And, even if I am Mizukage now, I have to admit, I don't deserve the title. I don't have the experience. I don't have the military achievements. There are plenty of stronger candidates in Kirigakure, so why me?" Her voice softened slightly. "I really want to know." Orochimaru was momentarily stunned by her sincerity. Then, after a brief pause, the corners of his mouth curled up playfully. Well, I suppose I could tell you, he murmured. But what if I told you? It's just plain curiosity? Mei blinked. There was a moment of silence. Then, to Orochimaru's genuine surprise, Mei smiled. Of course, I believe you. She turned fully, stepped forward, and bowed deeply. Regardless of your reasons, on behalf of Kirigakure, I sincerely thank you for what you've done for our village. Her words genuinely caught Orochimaru off guard. Was this the mindset of a true Kage? For the sake of the village, Hiruzen had cast aside their master-disciple bond and betrayed him. For the sake of the village, the third Raikage had sacrificed his own dignity, even kneeling before Orochimaru to beg for his son's life. And now, because he had saved Kirigakure, Mei had put aside her prejudices and bowed to him, a man branded as a traitor. Orochimaru chuckled softly. I suppose I really was never meant to be a Kage. He shook his head. But as he observed Mei, her confident yet graceful posture, he had to admit, she was quite striking. No need to be so formal, he finally said. Just don't forget our agreement. Mei hesitated, then nodded. I won't. With that, she turned and left the room. As soon as she was gone, a distortion rippled through the air. A masked figure emerged from the shadows. What's the next move? Obito's voice was low. Do we just take Yagura and leave? Orochimaru took a sip of tea, unbothered. Almost, he mused. But first, there's someone else I'd like to meet. One day later, jungle outside Kirigakure. A tall, imposing figure moved steadily through the misty jungle. Strapped to his waist was a massive blade, so large that it couldn't be carried on his back. His skin was ashen blue, his teeth sharp and jagged like a shark's. His dark blue hair swayed slightly as he walked. His expression remained unreadable. Then, suddenly, a black silhouette appeared before him, wielding a coral staff. Who's there? The man's sharp eyes flashed. He instinctively lowered his stance, fingers tightening around his sword's hilt. But as he got a clearer look at the figure, he relaxed. Oh, it's you, he exhaled. His lips curled into a toothy grin. Mizukage-sama, no, my mistake, the former Mizukage. From behind the misty figure, a hoarse voice spoke. Hashigaki Kisame? Kisame tensed. He immediately sidestepped, creating some distance. His grip on his sword tightened once more. You snuck up on me? He grinned wider, his razor-sharp teeth glinting in the fog. Ha! You must be quite the powerhouse. Another voice joined in. A masked figure stepped forward. And here I thought you'd be smarter than this. Obito's voice was calm, yet commanding. Let's make introductions, shall we? He gestured slightly. I am Uchiha Madara. Then, he pointed behind Kisame. And the man standing behind you is Orochimaru of the legendary Sannin. Kisame's pupils shrank. Uchiha Madara? Orochimaru? Chapter 344. Obito originally had short hair, but at this moment, he used the transformation technique to alter his hairstyle. His once short hair was now styled into the wild, flowing mane of Uchiha Madara, the infamous killing mat. Standing behind the fourth Mizukage, he remained partially obscured, making it difficult for Kisame to get a clear look at him. Uchiha Madara? You've got to be kidding me. Kisame glanced at Orochimaru from the corner of his eye and grinned. That man should have been dead long ago. As for Orochimaru? He chuckled. Now that's a name I've heard way too many times over the years. Never thought I'd see you here in Kirigakure. What an honor. We've been watching you for quite some time, Kisame Hashigaki. Obito's voice was calm but piercing. It must be exhausting, carrying out all those dirty missions for your village and your country, isn't it? Kisame's grin didn't fade, but his grip on Samahata remained firm. Exhausting? Maybe. But I fail to see what that has to do with you. His gaze sharpened. And what I really can't wrap my head around is how the fourth Mizukage, someone I always believed to be a true leader, ended up as your puppet. He sneered. Amazing. Those glowing eyes of yours, do they really have the power to control the Mizukage? Are you seriously claiming to be Uchiha Madara? It doesn't matter whether he's Uchiha Madara or not. Orochimaru's hoarse voice drifted through the mist, calm yet insidious. What matters is that from this moment on, you will become one of us. Kisame tilted his head. Oh? His grin widened. Is that an order? Or a threat? Orochimaru merely spread his hands in an exaggerated shrug. Does it really matter? You're asking me to betray my village. Not at all. Orochimaru's lips curled into a faint smile. But perhaps I should show you something first. It might help you make up your mind. As he spoke, Orochimaru pulled out a peculiar-looking device. A portable 3D projector. With the mist in the air acting as a natural screen, the projected image became even clearer, more vivid. What is this? Even Obito was caught off guard. He knew Orochimaru had access to high-tech equipment, but this was something he had never seen before. Kisame scoffed. Ha! Looks like a fancy toy. This is no ordinary toy. Orochimaru's smile deepened. Watch carefully. Kisame narrowed his eyes, finally taking a closer look. And then, he recognized it. The scene playing before him was all too familiar. It was none other than a recording of Orochimaru aiding Mei in her bid for the Mizukage position, and, more importantly, evidence of the Fuguki secretly selling Kirigakure's classified information to foreign nations. Orochimaru's voice remained eerily calm. Your superior, the Fuguki, is a rather ambitious man. Ever since the third Mizukage stepped down, he's coveted the position of Mizukage for himself. But, for various reasons, he was never able to seize the seat. And so, following the philosophy of if I can't have it, I'll destroy it, he began selling Kirigakure's secrets to rival nations in exchange for personal gain. Kisame's expression shifted ever so slightly. His lips curled downward, his fingers tightening around Samahata's handle. Even for someone like him, someone accustomed to bloodshed and betrayal, this revelation was unsettling. Kisame had spent his life carrying out covert missions, eliminating his own comrades in the name of duty. He had already questioned his purpose countless times. But this? Seeing his superior, the very man he had followed betraying their village so blatantly, it left him feeling hollow. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow at Kisame's reaction. Oh? You're surprised? Then, let me show you something even more unexpected. The projection shifted. A woman appeared on the screen. She was clad in an elegant blue dress, her presence striking yet composed. And in that moment, her voice carried through the mist. A voice filled with genuine gratitude, thanking Orochimaru. Kisame's eyes widened slightly. The fifth Mizukage. Terumi Mei? Orochimaru continued, his tone unchanging. I assume you've figured it out by now, we had a hand in your village's reform. So, if you join us, it doesn't mean betraying Kirigakure. A flicker of hesitation crossed Kisame's face. What exactly does your organization do? His tone had finally lost its edge. A group powerful enough to not only count someone like Orochimaru among its members but also influence Kirigakure's internal affairs? He had to admit, he was curious. Orochimaru's answer was simple. We maintain world peace and strive to create a world without war. Kisame let out a dry chuckle. World peace? That's quite the noble dream, but this world is built on lies. How do I know what you just showed me is the truth? Orochimaru smirked and tucked away the projector. That's easy. He didn't try to argue. Instead, he simply called Mei over that evening to speak with him in person. From the mountain's peak, Kisame watched the two interact. And in that moment, he believed. Unbelievable. Kisame exhaled slowly. Your influence, Your power, it's almost absurd. Maybe you really can change this world. Then let's go. Obito finally spoke again. His tone was calm, assured. At the very least, we can promise you this, we don't kill our own. Unless, of course, they betray us. Kisame didn't respond immediately. Then, after a moment, he and Obito turned, leading the fourth Mizukage away. At the foot of the mountain, Orochimaru and Terumi remained, their conversation continuing. Fuguki, was he really leaking intel? Terumi still found it hard to believe. The leader of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, the man who stood at the very top of Kiragakure's hierarchy, was secretly betraying them? Orochimaru's reply was cold and factual. The evidence is conclusive. Send 2 of your best intelligence operatives to investigate, and you'll find out for yourself. Then, after a pause, he added, that said, I'll be taking Samahana. Mei stopped in her tracks. Absolutely not. You've already taken 5 of our swords. If you take the last one, what are we supposed to use? Orochimaru's expression didn't change. A weapon is merely a tool. Then, as if making a casual trade, he added, fine. I'll have Tsunade return 2 of them in exchange. Consider it a deal. Mei stared at him, speechless. This man had stolen from them, only to negotiate with the stolen goods? How shameless could he be? But what choice did she have? With Orochimaru's power, he didn't need to bargain at all, he could simply take Samahana and leave. Yet, he had chosen to negotiate instead. In his own twisted way, he was giving her respect. After a moment, Mei sighed. Fine. I want the Nuabari and the Kiba blades. Orochimaru shrugged. Deal. How do you plan to get Samahana? Don't worry about it. Just, please, don't hurt my people. Orochimaru chuckled. I'll do my best. Chapter 345, Kisame Hashigaki, the infamous tailless beast of Kirigakure, was known for his monstrous chakra reserves. In the original story, Hyuga Neji once remarked that, aside from Naruto, Kisame possessed the largest chakra reserves he had ever seen. However, despite his immense chakra, Kisame's combat effectiveness would be significantly diminished without his signature weapon, Samahana. Thus, to mold him into a Kage-level powerhouse capable of taking on Jinchuriki, Orochimaru needed to ensure that this weapon ended up in Kisame's hands. Originally, Kisame wouldn't leave Kirigakure for several more years, not until after Itachi had joined the Akatsuki. But now, everything had changed with Orochimaru's interference. Even Samahana, which was meant to belong to Kisame, had to be acquired through a different method. The wielder of Samahana, Fuguki Suikazan, was Kisame's superior and one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. A formidable warrior in his own right, Fuguki's strength was even more pronounced when wielding Samahana. As a member of the 7 swordsmen, he was ruthless by nature yet highly vigilant, especially when it came to guarding his weapon. Samahana never left his side, not even when he slept. But for Orochimaru, who possessed the Flying Thunder God technique, stealing it was hardly a challenge. Summoning Jutsu! With a boom, a puff of white smoke appeared, and a small black creature emerged before Orochimaru. Master! Ah, I need you to steal something for me. Steal? The little creature, Yamana, hesitated, clearly confused. With Orochimaru's strength, wouldn't it be easier to just take what he wanted by force? Why resort to sneaky tactics? But as a summoned beast, it had no right to question Orochimaru's orders. Wherever Orochimaru pointed, it would go. So, using the vision granted by his scout flies, Orochimaru marked Yamana with a Flying Thunder God seal and directed it to burrow underground, heading toward Fuguki's residence. Though Fuguki was not a major political figure, as one of the 7 swordsmen, his estate was naturally quite large. His home, a massive stone fortress, was spacious, sturdy, and heavily secured. Scanning the empty halls, Orochimaru smirked. It seemed this man was quite confident in his own security. Aside from 4 or 5 guards stationed around, there was no one else inside. According to prior reconnaissance, Fuguki should be resting at this time, so Orochimaru wasn't in a hurry. He continued guiding Yamada forward. At that moment, Orochimaru mused, if the second Hokage knew his signature Flying Thunder God technique was being used for petty theft, would he burst out of his coffin just to scold him for misusing his genius? By dawn, on the western outskirts of Kirigakure, Kisame sat against a massive stone, his massive sword resting across his lap as he dozed off. A short distance away, Obito and the fourth Mizukage sat across from each other in silence, both lost in thought. There was no conversation, no exchange of words, only quiet observation. Then, whoosh! A figure suddenly appeared before them. Kisame's eyes snapped open, his instincts sharpening as he prepared for battle, only to see a large, bandaged sword thrown toward him. "This is for you," Orochimaru said casually, tossing the weapon his way. Kisame reflexively caught it, but as his gaze fell upon the blade, a flicker of astonishment crossed his face. "Samada?" He was genuinely surprised. Orochimaru had actually managed to obtain this legendary weapon so effortlessly? "Did you take care of Fuguki?" Kisame asked, his excitement barely concealed. "No," Orochimaru replied flatly. "I have no interest in him." "Fight? Kill?" Orochimaru had long since lost interest in reckless battles. If he didn't have to fight, he wouldn't. And if the opponent wasn't worth his time, he certainly wouldn't bother. "Then how did you get it?" Kisame asked, gripping the sword tightly, unable to contain his curiosity. He had coveted this weapon for a long time. He had been waiting for the right moment to take it himself, but now, Orochimaru had simply handed it to him? If Fuguki was still alive, how had Orochimaru managed to seize his sword? Hearing Kisame's question, Orochimaru simply shrugged. "That's a secret." At that same moment, Fuguki Suikazan awoke from his slumber. Instinctively, he reached for his weapon. But his hand grasped nothing but empty air. Frowning, he groped around again, once, twice, 3 times, yet still found nothing. T/N, that feeling when you can't find your phone, ha ha ha. His body stiffened. A deep sense of unease crept into his gut. Bolting upright, he turned to where Samahata should have been, only to see an empty space. His stomach dropped. No way. A furious roar erupted from the stone fortress. His blade, gone? How was that possible? His residence was extremely well hidden, practically impenetrable. Within Kirigakure, his security was second only to Danzo's in Konoha. There were no outsiders nearby, and with his strength, there was no way someone could have infiltrated his domain without him noticing. Right? Right? Yet, the evidence was undeniable. Just as panic began to set in, BAM. The door was kicked open. A flood of Kirigakure shinobi poured in. "What the hell is this?" Fuguki snarled, his fury palpable. "Do you all have a death wish?" One of the leading shinobi stepped forward and spoke coldly. "Under the orders of Lord Mizukage, Fuguki Suikazan, you are under arrest for treason." "What?" Fuguki's eyes widened in shock. "Treason?" Before he could fully process the accusation, his battle instincts flared. "You're looking for a fight?" he growled darkly. "Fine, I'll give you one. Ninja art, needle Samban." His hair instantly hardened, transforming into countless needle-like projectiles that shot toward the Kirigakure forces like a torrential storm. But, splash! The shinobi struck by the attack dissolved into puddles of water. Water clones! The real operatives had been prepared for resistance from the very start. From the moment Fuguki fought back, this was no longer an arrest, it was an execution. If he still had Samahata, he could have turned the tide of battle. Even if Mei personally led the charge, there was a chance he could have escaped. But now? Without Samahata, he was like an eagle with clipped wings, powerless. Escape was no longer an option. Especially now that he had arrived. A white-haired boy in a short-sleeved top stepped forward from the crowd. The moment Fuguki saw him, all thoughts of fleeing vanished. His heart sank. Damn it. Hozuki Mangetsu? Haha, my apologies, Lord Fuguki, Mangetsu said with a smirk. Chapter 346, Hozuki Mangetsu, a prodigy of Kirigakure, was a master of the 7 ninja swords. But now, before he ever had the chance to wield them all, 6 of the 7 blades had already fallen into Orochimaru's hands. The only exception was the executioner's blade, which had been taken by Juzo Biwa to the Akatsuki. As a result, Mangetsu now found himself without a sword to wield. Even so, his combat prowess far exceeded that of an ordinary shinobi. The Hozuki clan's secret water transformation technique made him immune to physical attacks, and combined with his exceptional combat skills and the support of other Kirigakure shinobi, taking down Fuguki Suikazan, who had lost Samahata, was an easy task. Thus, the Bloody Mist era under the 4th Mizukage, Yagura, was brought to an early end thanks to Orochimaru's involvement. With his assistance, the young Terumi Mei embarked on her path to becoming the new Mizukage. A 19-year-old Kage? A remarkable feat. While not as extreme as Gaara becoming Kazekage at 15, it was still unheard of for a 19-year-old woman to take such a position at this point in history. After handing Samahata over to Kisame, Orochimaru parted ways with them. He carried a katana at his side, moving leisurely along the forest paths of the Land of Water. Kabuto. I'm here, Lord Orochimaru. How is the investigation I assigned to you progressing? We've located their settlement and gathered detailed information on the clan. Good. In that case, it's up to you to find an opportunity to retrieve the child. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. With that brief exchange, Kabuto's next task was decided. Orochimaru gave a slight nod, then pulled out 2 scrolls and handed them to Kabuto. These should help you handle any unexpected situations. Thank you, Lord Orochimaru. Kabuto accepted the scrolls with both hands, bowing respectfully. He knew that one contained advanced ninja tools, while the other held genetic restoration fluid. With these, along with his own skills in espionage, he could operate freely within the Land of Water. Orochimaru waved him off and continued his slow journey toward the border. Kabuto, however, remained where he was, only looking toward the dimly lit distance once Orochimaru had disappeared from view. Kimimaro of the Kagaya clan? Why had Orochimaru come to the Land of Water? It certainly wasn't to help Kirigakure with its reforms. His real reason, aside from avoiding Obito, was to study the Kagaya clan's bloodline. By now, his own strength had reached a level where conventional power held little interest for him. While he was delving into scientific advancements, researching ancient bloodlines had become another of his pursuits. The Kagaya clan was a warlike people, known for their unique Kekkei Jinkai, the Shikatsumiyaku. One of their members who inherited this ability was named Kagaya Kimimaro. From Orochimaru's recollections, Kimimaro's features bore a striking resemblance to those of the ancient Akatsuki clan. In other words, the Kagaya were likely direct descendants of Kagaya Akatsuki. Orochimaru's current interests were largely focused on those connected to the Akatsuki lineage. As for helping Kirigakure reform, that had been nothing more than a fleeting whim after his encounter with Terumi Mei. People who were too kind would be trampled by the times, but those who only knew war and slaughter would be abandoned by them just the same. The Kagaya clan belonged to the latter category. A clan that lived solely for battle, without intelligence or strategy, was doomed to destruction. Orochimaru had no intention of saving them. He had simply left Kabuto behind in the Land of Water with instructions to retrieve Kimimaro and bring him to Otogakure. Time passed, and soon, it was June of Konoha's 52nd year, 1 month after Orochimaru had left the Land of Water. In a cavern hidden within a hollow mountain in the Land of Grass, 2 figures clad in black robes adorned with red clouds stood side by side. One possessed lavender ripple-patterned eyes. The other, a woman, wore a small purple flower in her hair. The cave was dark and damp, but neither of them minded. Behind them stood a massive humanoid statue, its 9 empty eyes staring blankly ahead, its body resembling withered wood. The Gedo statue. They were preparing to perform a sealing ritual. Pain stepped onto his designated spot on the Geto statue, ready to begin the process, when Conan suddenly spoke. Pain, are we really going through with this? Why? Pain's voice was calm. Do you doubt Lord Orochimaru? No, Conan hesitated. It just feels cruel. Cruel? Pain's expression remained unreadable. If not for Lord Orochimaru, we would have endured far worse cruelty. He saved us from the horrors of war, Conan. So don't waver now. You're right, she sighed. I was overthinking it. Sorry. Pain gave a faint smile but said nothing more, raising his hand into position. A moment later, spectral projections of figures clad in akatsuki robes appeared one by one on the fingers of the Geto statue. Including Pain and Conan, there were only 7 in total. Summoning us at this time, what's the reason, leader, came the cold, hoarse voice of Sasori of the Red Sand. Sasori had 2 forms, his human form and his puppet form. At the moment, he was in his puppet body, Hirako, lying low to the ground, the metallic scorpion tail behind him swaying slightly. Pain responded flatly. We're sealing the first captured tailed beast today. But first, let me introduce 2 new members. Oh? New recruits? Now this is getting interesting. The group's been feeling a little empty lately. Is that so? Then I suppose one of them must be responsible for the first capture? You'll see soon enough. At that moment, a loud, echoing boom sounded from the cavern's stone entrance. Slowly, the stone door creaked open. A tall figure clad in an akatsuki robe stepped inside, a massive sword strapped to his back. Juzo B1 narrowed his eyes. Fuguki? No, wait. You're that guy. Kisame? Oh? Juzo-senpai is here too? Kisame grinned, amused. What a pleasant surprise. With a loud thud, he casually dropped an unconscious body onto the cavern floor. It was Yagura. The stone door sealed shut behind him. Juzo's gaze flicked to the weapon on Kisame's back. Wait. You have Samahata? That means, the Fuguki. Oh. Looks like you're familiar with each other. More missed defectors, huh? Ha! Kirigakure sure breeds a lot of rogue ninjas. The more, the merrier, I suppose. A sudden, raspy chuckle echoed through the cavern. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward the source of the voice. A figure with golden, snake-like eyes had appeared on the left pinky finger of the Geto statue's projection. Orochimaru. Chapter 347. Although Orochimaru was one of the founding members of Akatsuki, the leader of the organization was still Pain. Just as Yahiko had been the nominal leader of Embarked, Pain now held the same role within Akatsuki. Orochimaru had never met the majority of the other members before. Yet the moment he arrived, he heard them engaged in a lively discussion. Taking a quick glance, he saw several familiar figures among them, along with one person he didn't recognize. Even with his vast knowledge, Orochimaru couldn't immediately determine which village this unfamiliar ninja came from. So, you must be our second new recruit? Sasori remarked calmly. You don't even greet your seniors when you see them? That's a bit rude, don't you think? Kakuzu added. When new members join, isn't it customary to introduce themselves first? Another unknown ninja chimed in. This kind of hazing wasn't uncommon. In any organization, veteran members often tested newcomers, and in a group like Akatsuki, composed entirely of S-rank rogue ninja, such behavior was even more pronounced. Seeing that everyone was targeting Orochimaru, Kisame, who had also just joined, grinned and wisely chose to remain silent. Although he wasn't sure under what circumstances Orochimaru had joined Akatsuki, or exactly when he had, he knew one thing for certain: Orochimaru was terrifyingly strong. The ease with which he had stolen Samahata alone was beyond the abilities of an ordinary shinobi. Orochimaru, unfazed, was about to respond, but to everyone's surprise, Pain spoke first. Let me handle the introductions. Despite his irritation, Pain maintained a calm demeanor. This man's name is Hoshigaki Kisame. Like Juzo, he hails from Kirigakure. And the one who just arrived, Orochimaru. One of the legendary Sannin of Konoha. I trust you've all heard of him. Orochimaru, one of the Sannin? At the mention of the name, there was a brief silence. Then, seriously? So that's who he is? No wonder he's so confident. Another big name joining our ranks, huh? Everyone reacted with varying degrees of surprise. After all, who in the shinobi world hadn't heard of Orochimaru? His reputation far surpassed that of Hanzo of the Salamander, the former ruler of Amigakure. Considering his strength, why would he bother introducing himself to them? Juzo Biwa, however, found himself in a particularly awkward position. He had recognized Orochimaru the moment he arrived. The last time they had met, Orochimaru had nearly wiped out the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. And now? Now, they were part of the same organization. But Orochimaru clearly had no interest in him. Back then, they had been on opposing sides, and it had been a battle to the death. Now, they were colleagues, so there was no point in dredging up the past. Pain continued with the introductions, and Orochimaru quickly took stock of the group. The unknown figure appeared to be a rogue ninja from the land of grass. Not that it mattered. He was grouped with Kakuzu, which meant he was unlikely to survive long anyway. Enough talk. Let's begin sealing the tailed beast, Pain ordered, cutting off any further conversation. Akatsuki's membership was small, and most of them were already well-known figures. A simple introduction was more than enough. At Pain's command, everyone fell silent. Kisame moved to his assigned position. On the way here, Obito had already given him a brief explanation of the sealing process, so even though this was his first time, he wasn't completely unfamiliar with it. Under normal circumstances, a Jinchuriki's strength was at least on par with a Kage, and they were heavily protected by their respective villages. Capturing them alive was no easy task. But Yagura was a rare exception. To ensure the sealing process went smoothly, Obito had released the Jinjutsu controlling Yagura partway through, leaving him in a weakened state. Then he had ordered Kisame to incapacitate him. And with Kisame's abilities, combined with Samahana, taking down a lone-tailed beast was almost too easy. Capturing a Jinchuriki alive? For him, it might be easier than for anyone else. By the time Yagura regained consciousness, he was already severely injured. He had no chance against Kisame. Phantom Dragon 9 Seals. With a hand seal, Pain activated the technique. The Gedo statue opened its mouth, and 9 spectral dragon-like chakra constructs emerged, coiling around Yagura and siphoning his chakra. A Jinchuriki was a unique existence. Their life force was intrinsically linked to their tailed beast. To extract a tailed beast, the Jinchuriki had to be captured alive, then forcibly separated from the beast before they died. The Phantom Dragon 9 Seals was a technique designed specifically for this purpose. It was an ability granted by the Gedo statue itself. But because tailed beasts contain massive amounts of chakra, the sealing process would take several days. Could a Jinchuriki survive after their tailed beast was extracted? Orochimaru had pondered this question for years. Beyond the resurrection techniques he had developed, he had also considered other possibilities such as life force transfer. Once a tailed beast was removed, the Jinchuriki's life force rapidly deteriorated. Even those with the vitality of the Uzumaki clan could only hold on for a short time. But since the problem was a loss of life force, then theoretically, if enough life force was replenished after the extraction, the Jinchuriki could survive. This was the principle behind Chiyo's reanimation jutsu. However, artificial humans, clones, and white Zetsu lacked true life force. The only viable method was life-for-life exchange. Orochimaru's thoughts drifted back from miles away, returning to his physical body, which sat inside a wooden house at an orphanage. He let out a quiet sigh. Whether it was using Edo Tensei in combination with cloning or forcibly transferring life force from one person to another, both could be considered forbidden techniques. Edo Tensei required human sacrifices. Life exchange, while it could be seen as an act of self-sacrifice, could also be twisted into dark sorcery if imposed on others. Still, how did I overlook this before? A sudden realization struck him. He quickly stood up and walked out of the room. Outside, in an open clearing, two figures, one large, one small, were playing a game. Kushina! Come here! Orochimaru called out. The red-haired woman turned in surprise. Huh? Lord Orochimaru, are you finished training? She asked, carrying her young daughter in her arms as she approached. I've found a way to keep you alive, Orochimaru said without preamble. Really? Kushina's eyes widened in shock, but her expression quickly turned wary. Wait. It's not one of those techniques again, is it? Of course not. Orochimaru chuckled. I just remembered, the nine tails can be split. Chapter 348, the people of Konoha, especially the women around Orochimaru, shared a common trait. They were too kind. Uzumaki Kushina was no exception. According to her, if Orochimaru had to obtain the tailed beasts, she would rather die than see him turn into a monster who abused forbidden techniques and killed without hesitation. Because now, she wasn't just a kind-hearted woman. She was a mother. She wanted Orochimaru to remain a positive figure in her daughter's eyes. If this had been the old Orochimaru, he would have scoffed at such naive thinking. In this chaotic era, what was the difference between killing a man and slaughtering livestock? Good and evil, righteousness and wickedness, were they anything more than illusions? The third Hokage had been known as a kind leader, yet on the battlefield, he had killed countless people. And behind closed doors, hadn't he also conducted his own secret experiments on living subjects? But as time passed, Orochimaru's perspective had shifted. He had grown weary of constant bloodshed. Life without personal connections held no meaning. So he had started exploring new avenues of study, learning to consider other people's opinions. That was why he had agreed to Kushina's request. He would find another way to ensure her survival. Until now, his focus had been on the concept of life force transfer. But he had overlooked a simpler solution: the Nine Tails chakra could be split into yin and yang. One part yin, one part yang. As long as a portion remained within her, Kushina would not die. Moreover, if extracting a tailed beast killed the Jinchuriki, but immediately sealing another one inside allowed them to survive. Then didn't that mean a synthetic chakra entity, created with yin-yang release, could serve the same purpose? Or perhaps, could a massive infusion of life force sustain a Jinchuriki even after their tailed beast was removed? Similar to how Naruto had saved my guy? After listening to Orochimaru's theory, Kushina finally felt some relief. Splitting it in two? That actually makes sense. When do you need it? We'll talk about it later. I have some unfinished business to take care of first. By the way, Kushina. Orochimaru suddenly smirked, tilting her chin up with his fingers. Why do you keep calling me Lord? Do we really need to be so formal? I think it's fine the way it is. Kushina smiled as she cradled her daughter in her arms. Back when she first met Orochimaru, she had little romantic attachment to him. But feelings could change over time. She wasn't immune to that. What's so good about it? Anyway, I think it's best this way. This way, other people won't suspect our relationship. And when we're doing things, it feels, better. Orochimaru blinked. Huh. Had she always been this sly? With Orochimaru and Akatsuki, the organization's progress had accelerated significantly. Just 2 months after sealing the three tails, they had pinpointed the locations of the other tailed beasts. Inside a cavern, the Akatsuki meeting commenced once again, their spirits projected onto the fingers of the Geto statue. But this time, only 8 figures were present. Kakuzu, where's your partner? Juzo Biwa asked curiously. Dead, Kakuzu replied flatly. Did you do it on purpose? He should have dodged. Kakuzu's tone was so indifferent that he might as well have been talking about the weather. Well, it was only natural. Akatsuki was made up of highly capable shinobi. If a weaker recruit couldn't keep up, their death was inevitable. Whatever. If he's dead, he's dead. Pain's voice carried no emotion. Most of Akatsuki's recruits were criminals. He wasn't going to waste time mourning them. However, with only 8 of us, it'll be difficult to capture and seal all the tailed beasts efficiently. We'll just go one at a time, Orochimaru said. Right now, Uchiha Itachi and Deidara were still brats, and Haiden was even younger than Kabuto. Recruiting them was out of the question. So for now, they had no choice but to proceed methodically. That's our only option for now, Pain agreed. We'll divide into teams. Conan and I will head to Kirigakure to capture the 6 tails. Kisame and Juzo, you'll go to the land of Earth and retrieve the 4 tails and 5 tails. Orochimaru and Kakuzu, you'll be responsible for the 2 tails and 8 tails. Sasori, return to the land of Wind and prepare. Once Conan and I capture the 9 tails, we'll join you. As for Zetsu, you're not a combatant, so you'll focus on gathering intel. Understood. No problem. Let's move. One by one, the projections faded from the cave. Orochimaru. Kakuzu remained a moment longer, turning to face him. Where should we meet? Where are you now? Orochimaru asked. Land of Fire. Short Book Street. HM? That's close. Orochimaru smirked. Wait for me there. Fine. Kakuzu's eyes gleamed faintly. I hope you're as interesting as your reputation suggests. Orochimaru gave no response. Instead, his projection disappeared in an instant, and his consciousness returned to his body. This time, he was not in the land of sound. He was in Konoha. More specifically, Tsunade's bedroom. The moment he opened his eyes, he found Tsunade sitting cross-legged in front of him, her elbows resting on her knees, chin propped up in her palms, watching him intently. Their faces were close. No more than 20 centimeters apart. Tsunade, why are you staring at me like that? I wanted to see what you were up to. Tsunade sighed, shaking her head. We were having a nice conversation, and then you just, bam. Meditation. What's with that? This is my job. Your job? She raised an eyebrow. What, plotting world destruction? I'll explain later. Fine, whatever. She leaned back, dropping the subject. Now, back to what we were talking about. You said you're capturing tailed beasts, and your reason is to reduce casualties? What do you mean by that? Orochimaru shrugged. It's not hard to understand, is it? We've all seen firsthand the destructive power of tailed beasts. If our forces overwhelm the enemy, and they're backed into a corner, what do you think will happen? A single tailed beast bomb could wipe out thousands. Even though I can subdue a Jinchuriki with ease, the safest course of action is to capture the tailed beasts beforehand. Tsunade exhaled sharply. How long will this take? 6 months at most. So in 6 months, war will break out. Orochimaru's golden eyes gleamed. It might not even take that long. Chapter 349, whether or not all Akatsuki members were present was irrelevant. What mattered was that Orochimaru needed an organization like this to shake the ninja world. That was why, despite having the power to stop it, he had instead played a role in its formation. He had no qualms about sharing much of this information with Tsunade, because with his current strength, he was confident he could control everything. The two of them talked from early evening into the late hours of the night, and by the end of it, Tsunade had a solid grasp of the situation. So, according to you, Kushina? She'll be fine, Orochimaru assured her, explaining his plan with the 9 tails. Splitting the beast in 2 and leaving half of it within her was enough to sustain her life. And beyond that, he had other methods to support her survival. Right. Tsunade nodded thoughtfully at his words. But, husband, if you truly want to minimize casualties, you should also consider the lives of the other Jinchuriki. Of course, I already know that. No need to remind me, Orochimaru replied matter-of-factly. I have my own way of handling things. Some Jinchuriki were relatives of the Kage. Killing them would provoke relentless retaliation from their villages, one that wouldn't stop unless every last one of them was eradicated. To avoid such trouble, it was in his best interest to ensure the Jinchuriki survived the extraction process. As long as you understand, Tsunade said with a small sigh of relief. I was worried you might change. Ever since Orochimaru had defected from Konoha and she had become Hokage, their meetings had grown infrequent. She had feared that, in that time, he might have turned into the kind of man she dreaded most. Orochimaru smirked and playfully lifted her chin. Whether I've changed or not, you could always test it yourself. HM? Test it? Tsunade blinked, then let out a laugh. Ha! You're just looking for an excuse to mess with me every time you come back to Konoha, aren't you? What do you take me for? Some tool to relieve your stress? If that's the case, why not go to one of them? I already have. Orochimaru's eyes flicked downward, his gaze drifting to her collar. But after all my travels, I've realized, I still prefer yours the most. Yeah, right. Who'd believe that? Tsunade scoffed, wrapping an arm around his neck. Now carry me inside. You seem more eager than I am. Of course I am. You have plenty of options, but I only have you. Now shut up and lie down. And so, Tsunade took the lead in claiming the battlefield. It was a long, exhausting night. Early the next morning, Orochimaru quietly left Konoha and resumed his mission to capture the tailed beasts. Catching one was no easy task. But for members of Akatsuki, all they needed was to locate the Jinchuriki. Finding the right moment to act was simply a matter of patience. After all, no one made it into Akatsuki without exceptional means. This time, they once again operated in pairs. A lone operative might be overwhelmed, but two were enough to handle any emergency. However, even with multiple teams working at once, the sealing process dictated the pace. The ghetto statue could only absorb one tailed beast at a time. Sealing two simultaneously wouldn't shorten the process, it would just make it more complicated. Thus, the missions were staggered. In the blink of an eye, 2 months passed. By then, 2 more tailed beasts had been sealed into the ghetto statue. One was the Six Tails, Saiken, captured by Pain. Its Jinchuriki, Utakata, was only slightly older than Kabuto. The other was the Four Tails, Son Goku, captured by Kisame. Its Jinchuriki, Rashi, had put up a decent fight, but the outcome was inevitable. Investigation. Strategy. Extraction. All in all, the process had taken 2 months. Konoha Year 53, January. In a secluded canyon within the Land of Lightning, a lone kunoichi was training. She had long, straight brown hair with a single braid draped down her back. Her movements were swift, precise, refined by years of discipline. Boom! A series of massive fireballs erupted from her hands, scorching the earth beneath them. The ground beneath her feet smoked from the lingering heat. Then, 2 figures appeared in the distance. Both were clad in black cloaks, adorned with red clouds. She ceased her training, her sharp eyes narrowing as she studied them. The 2 approached slowly. One was a pale-skinned man with long, dark hair. The other was a masked, middle-aged man with a grim expression. They stopped a few feet away. She observed them carefully, her posture proud, her aura commanding. Then, a low, raspy voice spoke. Two Tails Jinchuriki. Niyujito? Yujito frowned, her stance shifting slightly. And who are you? The 2 had appeared so suddenly, their intentions all too obvious. She knew they weren't here for anything good. The pale man's lips curled into an unsettling smile. My name is Orochimaru. Yujito's heart skipped a beat. Orochimaru? Her expression darkened. As a Jinchuriki, she had never been directly involved in war. But she still knew the names of the world's strongest shinobi. And Orochimaru's name was one of the most feared. He was a man spoken of in hushed whispers. A monster cloaked in human skin. What the hell is he doing here? Her grip on her kunai tightened. I don't know what your business is, but if you've come for my tailed beast... Relax, Orochimaru interrupted. His smile never wavered. We're here to save you. Save me? That's right. I could explain, but it'll make more sense once you release the two tails. Humph. So you are after the tailed beasts. Yujito scoffed, brandishing her kunai. I don't care who you are, even if you're Orochimaru, I won't just surrender without a fight. She lowered herself into a ready stance. Her sharp, cold gaze locked onto him. Seeing this, Kakuzu muttered under his breath. Orochimaru, want me to handle this, or do you want to do it yourself? I'll take care of it. Fine. I'd actually like to see the so-called legendary Sannin in action. Kakuzu took a step back, giving Orochimaru room. Within Akatsuki, everyone wanted a chance to team up with Orochimaru. His reputation was too well known. Everyone was curious to witness his fighting style firsthand. But within the organization, Pain's word was law. This time, Kakuzu was the only one with the opportunity. Orochimaru paid him no mind. He stepped forward, his ever-present smirk deepening. Give up. You won't win. As he spoke, 9 dark orbs manifested behind him. And yet, his golden, slit-pupil eyes remained unchanged. Chapter 350, Orochimaru had not activated any special mode, yet 9 truth-seeking orbs hovered in a perfect arc behind him. Clearly, he had replicated the technique of the Sage of Six Paths' 2 sons, forging his own truth-seeking orbs through his personal power. These 9 black spheres. Kakuzu narrowed his eyes. Standing behind Orochimaru, he couldn't see the man's pupils. But he could feel the overwhelming power radiating from those orbs. Even without actively sensing them, the sheer pressure was undeniable. What the hell is this? Kakuzu murmured, unable to believe what he was sensing. It was a power beyond comprehension. Truth-seeking orbs were the ultimate manifestation of the complete power of the 6 paths. They couldn't be obtained through sheer spiritual strength or raw physical might alone. One needed both in balance and at an overwhelming level. To generate them, a shinobi's body had to surpass even Hashirama Senju's sage body, and their spiritual power had to exceed that of an ordinary Rinnegan user. Otherwise, at best, one could wield fragments of the 6 paths' power, like Nagato or Madara with the Rinnegan, but never produce a single truth-seeking orb. Both Madara and Obito had created them, but only after obtaining the 10 tails power. Naruto had acquired them through the inheritance of the 9-tailed beasts and the Sage of Six Paths himself. So then, what had Orochimaru done to achieve this? There was no doubt he had fully integrated the Rinnegan. And yet, through his own power and technology, he had managed to conceal the ripple-pattern eyes of the Rinnegan. A true sage body, combined with the Rinnegan, pushed him terrifyingly close to the level of the Sage of Six Paths. And with his mastery of Senjutsu and the meteor-derived energy from Hashigakure, he had gained true 6 paths level power. While it wasn't on par with the Sage after he had sealed Kagaya, it was enough. Seeing the 9 black orbs manifest around Orochimaru, Yujito felt a deep unease. Is he unbeatable? Boom! Before she could finish her thought, a sudden force struck her like a sledgehammer, sending her flying. Invisible attacks followed in rapid succession. Blow after blow. She couldn't even defend herself. What is this? Boom! A massive surge of chakra erupted from her body. She was preparing to unleash the Two Tails power to break free from Orochimaru's relentless assault. But before she could react, her chakra abruptly vanished. Orochimaru had already used the Flying Thunder God technique, appearing before her in an instant. A truth-seeking orb, reshaped into a black rod, was driven straight into her abdomen. Boom! Yujito's eyes widened in shock. Her chakra, both hers and the Two Tails, was completely suppressed. As if it had been erased from existence. Her strength failed her. She collapsed onto one knee, gasping for breath, clutching the ground for support. How? How can you be this fast? The rumored flying thunder god. But what about the invisible attacks before that? The surrounding Kumo shinobi were just as bewildered. Kakuzu, too, was struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Was this really Orochimaru's power? Had the Jinchuriki already lost? When did Orochimaru become this monstrous? While Kakuzu was still piecing things together, Orochimaru crouched beside the fallen Yujito. She tried to resist, but her body refused to move. Damn it! I told you, Orochimaru whispered, his tone disturbingly calm, you're no match for me. He retracted the truth-seeking orbs. Before Yujito's strength could return, he placed a hand on her chest. Fire release, heavenly prison. Kumogakure, Reikage's office. What did you just say? The fourth Reikage's fury was palpable. Yujito is missing? His subordinates flinched under his glare. Yes, sir, the situation is. Explain. Now. With trembling voices, they recounted the events. By the time they finished, the Reikage had slammed a hand onto his desk, rising to his feet. Bastards, all of you, with me. Crash! He shattered the office window and leaped out, dashing toward the scene at full speed. The Jinchuriki were Kumogakure's ultimate weapons. Normally, villages assigned elite shinobi to protect them in secret. But Kumo was different. The Jinchuriki had good relationships with their tailed beasts, and Kumogakure's warrior culture bred strength and resilience. The Reikage had seen no reason to assign bodyguards. But now! He sped toward Yujito's usual training grounds, guided by several Kumo shinobi who had already begun their investigation. Reikage-sama. What's the situation? Yes, sir, aside from signs of training, we've found no significant traces. What? Wait, there's more. Another scout hurried over. Reikage-sama, we did find something unusual. Take me there. Now. With a blur of movement, the Reikage and his men arrived at an open clearing. There, next to two faint footprints, was a shallow groove in the dirt. Inside the groove was a strange, viscous fluid. Reikage-sama, the scout reported, according to our analysis, this is the secretion of a snake. A snake? Land of sound, dense jungle. Two figures clad in Akatsuki's signature black cloaks moved leisurely through the forest. Beside them slithered a massive python. Not as large as Manda, but far larger than any normal snake. By Ryuchi cave standards, it was of medium size. Attached to the top of its head was a reinforced iron plate, with 4 thick chains securing Yujito to it. Her limbs were bound at the corners, and her chakra remained completely sealed. She could barely move. But she was still alive. After all, Orochimaru had only struck her abdomen. And the power of the truth-seeking orb had not detonated. For a Jinchuriki, such injuries were far from fatal. Kakuzu, who had remained silent for most of the journey, finally spoke. I must admit, that was impressive, Orochimaru. He glanced at the still-bound Yujito before adding, 1 hit. That's all it took? Humph. Even the first Hokage couldn't have done that in my time. Orochimaru didn't deny it. You're right, he said simply. The first Hokage couldn't have done it. Kakuzu frowned slightly. He was an old relic. He had fought Hashirama Senju personally. And while the difference in power had been vast, his statement was no bluff. Just like how a young Inoki had once faced Uchiha Madara in battle. Even if Inoki had been terrified at the time, the fact remained, he had fought Madara. With power like yours, even the leader's Rinnegan wouldn't guarantee victory against you, Kakuzu muttered. So tell me, why did you even join Akatsuki? Chapter 351, is Orochimaru stronger than the first Hokage? It seems almost certain. After all, Hashirama Senju's power stemmed from Ajura Otsutsuki, who inherited only half of the Sage of Six Paths' power. That alone speaks volumes about the first Hokage's strength. He was indeed powerful, capable of effortlessly subduing tailed beasts. But compared to Orochimaru's current 6 paths level abilities, the gap wasn't insurmountable. Truth-seeking orbs were the purest manifestation of 6 paths power. Uchiha Madara, wielding just a single Rinnegan, had been able to obliterate 9-tailed beasts in an instant. Orochimaru possessed both Rinnegan, combined with Flying Thunder God and Truth-seeking orbs. It wasn't surprising that he could incapacitate a Jinchuriki instantly with the element of surprise. The black rods, created through Yin-Yang release, were already capable of suppressing and disrupting a tailed beast's chakra. Truth-seeking orbs not only carried that function but also possessed the power to obliterate all matter. Furthermore, Orochimaru had struck the Jinchuriki's most vital chakra meridians, crippling her ability to fight back. Why did I join Akatsuki? Hearing Kakuzu's question, Orochimaru gave a faint smile. No grand reason. Perhaps. I was just looking for something to do. Every Akatsuki member had their own past before joining the organization. Some were driven by faith. Some sought wealth. Some pursued art. Some simply had nowhere else to go and treated Akatsuki as a temporary home. Just looking for something to do? Kakuzu narrowed his eyes. Are you searching for the meaning of your existence? Something like that. Orochimaru shrugged, offering neither confirmation nor denial. These days, aside from delving into advanced technology, the only thing that seemed to interest him was hunting Jinchuriki. Orochimaru, you bastard. Stop right there. A familiar roar suddenly rang out, cutting their conversation short. Then, whoosh! 3 figures dropped from the sky, landing with force. At the forefront stood a tall, muscular man with dark skin, dressed casually yet exuding an imposing aura. TCH, looks like we've got company, Kakuzu muttered, frowning. Was Kakuzu strong? If Orochimaru had to evaluate him, he would say moderately so. Kakuzu's raw strength might barely reach Kage level, but at best, he ranked below the 3rd Hokage in his prime. Among elite shinobi, he wasn't particularly outstanding. So how had he survived this long? How had he defeated Jinchuriki? The answer was his deceptive ability. His Earth Grudge Fear technique allowed him to generate black tendrils that could be used for long-range ninjutsu. More importantly, those same tendrils allowed him to steal hearts and prolong his life. Most of his victories came from deception. An enemy would think they had killed him, lower their guard, only to be ambushed when he resurrected. It was a tactic used frequently by both the 2nd Hokage and Danzo, feigning death to create an opening. But against overwhelming force, such tactics were useless. And when the 4th Raikage was leading the charge, Kakuzu's usual tricks wouldn't work. Because it wasn't just Kage level, he was one of the strongest in that tier. His raw power, combined with insane speed, made him nearly unstoppable. Not to mention, he wasn't alone. If Kakuzu tried to play dead, A's 2 subordinates would be there to finish the job before he could recover. So it's the 4th Raikage. Orochimaru's lips curled into a smirk. What's the matter? He asked lazily. Something wrong? Something wrong? The 4th Raikage's glare darkened as he spotted Yujito, bound and restrained atop Orochimaru's massive python summon. His blood boiled with fury. You came to my village, stole my Jinchuriki, and now you're asking me if something's wrong? Don't play dumb. I clenched his fists. You already know the answer. He was impulsive, hot-tempered, and the kind of man who acted first and asked questions later. But Orochimaru was the only man alive who could make him hesitate. The other Kumonin were also staring at Yujito's restrained form. Orochimaru's smirk widened. So, I take it you want her back? He sighed, almost mockingly. I hate to sound arrogant, but I'd advise you to abandon that idea. You bastard. Wait, see. A young man with white hair and a slightly lazy expression suddenly stepped forward, stopping his companion. Darui, what are you doing? Don't rush in. Not against this guy. Darui's tone was cautious. Though he had never personally witnessed Orochimaru fight, as one of the Reikage guards, he had detailed intelligence on the Sannin. C, however, was younger. He had only recently become A's bodyguard and had no idea just how dangerous Orochimaru truly was. Among their group, only A could last more than a few seconds against him. Anyone else who rushed in? Dead on arrival. Orochimaru, A growled. I'm not letting you leave today. C. Darui. Right. Understood. Lightning release, illusion technique, thunder illusion lightning pillar. Lightning release, Black Panther. Both Kumonins swiftly formed hand seals. A faint beastly roar echoed as black lightning took the form of a massive panther, surging toward Orochimaru and Kakuzu. Almost simultaneously, a blinding light, similar to the white extreme attack, flashed, robbing them of their vision. As the Reikage, A knew exactly what had to be done. His Jinchuriki had been captured. He had found the enemy's trail and caught up to them. If he hesitated because the enemy was too strong, then what kind of Reikage was he? But none of them realized. Orochimaru was already playing on a different level. With Nozomi's blinding light and his absurd speed, a shot toward Kakuzu in an instant. He knew Orochimaru was strong. Even with 2 guards backing him up, taking him down would be no easy task. So instead, he aimed for the weaker target first. Eliminate Kakuzu, recover Yujito, and then focus everything on Orochimaru. Too fast. Kakuzu's eyes widened. He tried to dodge. But blinded by the lightning beam, there was no way he could react in time. Heavy stream storm. Bam! A devastating punch slammed into Kakuzu's back, right over his heart. The force sent him flying. But it wasn't finished. Even as Kakuzu was launched through the air, A was already pivoting. His next target, Orochimaru. Yet, just as he was about to strike, an invisible force suddenly erupted from nowhere. A massive repelling force surged outward, halting the Reikage charge in an instant. Shinra Tensei. Chapter 352, Boom! 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 A powerful repulsive force erupted from Orochimaru, radiating outward in all directions. The 3 figures were hurled back by the immense shockwave, carving deep trenches into the ground as they skidded across the terrain. Shinra Tensei, the gravitational repulsion technique wielded through the Rinnegan. Its principle was simple. By concentrating chakra at its core, the user could expel all objects around them in an omnidirectional blast. Why had Orochimaru used Shinra Tensei? The explanation was straightforward. While the Rinnegan had originally belonged to Uchiha Madara, Orochimaru had extracted his own pair from Nagato. That meant he could not only wield Madara's abilities but also those of Nagato. The limbo, border jail that had crippled Yujito earlier? That was Madara's technique. And now, Shinra Tensei, a technique frequently used by Nagato. But how could Orochimaru use both? The truth was simple, these techniques weren't exclusive to individuals. Madara had always possessed the full power of the Rinnegan, while Nagato, despite his immense potential, had only been able to tap into a fraction of it. For instance, Nagato's Chibaku Tensei took time to charge. Madara, however, could unleash multiple at once with greater force. If one could wield Chibaku Tensei, then Shinra Tensei was naturally within reach as well. Madara had never used Shinra Tensei in battle, not because he couldn't, but because he had superior abilities at his disposal. Even in the original timeline, Naruto, when powered by Four Tails, had been able to resist Shinra Tensei. Against the likes of Super Kage-level fighters and tailed beasts, the technique wasn't always practical. Orochimaru, however, had essentially replicated Madara's Rinnegan. It was only logical that he could wield its techniques. Of course, his Rinnegan suppression method was still newly developed. His mastery wasn't yet at Madara's level. But with his Sage Body, Uchiha DNA, Meteor-infused Ten-Tails Chakra, and Sage Mode, his growth in Rinnegan abilities would far outpace what Nagato had achieved. What was that? Damn it! C and Darui struggled to rise from the dirt, still reeling from the impact. The area around them, a 10-meter radius, had been completely leveled by the repulsion force. C's face darkened. What kind of power is this? They hadn't sustained major injuries, but the sheer defensive power of Orochimaru's technique. It had negated C's lightning illusion beam. It had overpowered Darui's Black Panther attack. And it had even sent the fourth Reikage flying, despite his lightning chakra cloak. A landed on his feet, staring at Orochimaru in disbelief. What the hell is going on with this guy? His attack and defense patterns were completely different from before. In his mind, the plan had been simple. C's lightning illusion beam should have neutralized Orochimaru's Sharingan, limiting his flying thunder god teleportation. Darui's Black Panther would have provided a follow-up strike. And then, himself would have moved in to shatter Orochimaru's defenses with his overwhelming speed and power. 3 against 1. Even if they couldn't win outright, they should have at least pressured him. But Orochimaru hadn't even used Susanoo. He hadn't teleported away. Instead, he had unleashed a completely unknown technique, Shinra Tensei. What kind of ability is this? The fourth Reikage. Orochimaru smirked. I'm afraid you won't be able to stop me. He turned to Kakuzu. Take the Jinchuriki and leave. TCH. As much as I hate this, Kakuzu muttered, pushing himself up, I guess I have no choice. The moment he spoke, the left side mask on his back detached, writhing with black tendrils, before collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Nothing more than an empty husk. The fourth Reikage and his team immediately tensed. What the hell? He took a direct hit to the heart and he's still standing? Kakuzu ignored their reactions. Casually dusting himself off, he began walking away, Orochimaru's massive python carrying the captured Yujito beside him. Of course, he didn't plan on going far. Orochimaru's battle prowess wasn't something just anyone could witness. Meanwhile, the land of whirlpools. Situated between the land of fire and the land of water, the remnants of Yazushio had long since been reduced to ruin. Without their once thriving shinobi village, the land had been ravaged by war. However, when Orochimaru had passed through, he had cleansed the region twice. As a result, the land of whirlpools was now relatively stable. At that moment, 8 figures moved along a hilly path within the country. At the forefront was Tsunade, clad in casual attire. Beside her walked Uchiha Mikoto, her trusted assistant. The remaining 6 figures, clad in ANBU combat uniforms and animal masks, moved in formation behind them. Tsunade-sama, was it really necessary for you to come in person? Mikoto's voice carried a hint of exasperation. As Hokage, Tsunade already had countless responsibilities. And now, she had personally left Konoha to meet with enemy shinobi? Tsunade waved her off dismissively. Being stuck in the village all day is suffocating. I needed some fresh air. This was a perfect excuse. But it's fine. It's just a few days. What's the worst that could happen? Mikoto sighed, realizing there was no talking her out of it. Suddenly, Tsunade narrowed her eyes. Hey, Mikoto, look over there. That person on the mountain. One of theirs? Mikoto followed her gaze. In the distance, standing atop a hill, was a young woman in a blue dress. Beside her stood several Kirigakure shinobi. Among them, a white-haired boy and a one-eyed middle-aged man. Mikoto nodded. According to our intel, yes. Tsunade frowned slightly. She's young. Mikoto raised an eyebrow. Well, yes. Why? Do you not like her? Tsunade crossed her arms. Logically, I respect her. But personally? She smirked. Can't say I'm a fan. Huh? Why not? Mikoto blinked, caught off guard. But before she could press for an answer, Tsunade had already stepped forward. Tsunade-sama. Wait for me. As they approached, the young woman atop the hill turned to greet them. Her expression was composed, her posture confident. Hokage-sama, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Her voice was smooth, yet firm. I am Terumi Mei, the 5th Mizukage of Kirigakure. Chapter 353, Tsunade was the Hokage. Mei was the Mizukage. A meeting between the leaders of two great nations should have been a grand affair, reflecting the prestige and dignity of their respective villages. Yet, instead of a formal summit, they had chosen to meet in a desolate, unremarkable location. The reason was simple: neither of them cared for unnecessary formalities. The two sides met while maintaining a safe distance. Tsunade was accompanied by 6 ANBU operatives and her trusted assistant, Uchiha Mikoto. Mei had brought along 2 bodyguards, Ao, a seasoned veteran, and to Tsunade's surprise, Hozuki Mangetsu. This meeting wasn't arranged for any hostile reasons. There were 2 objectives. First, Tsunade had received word from Orochimaru and had come to return 2 of Kirigakure's 7 ninja swords. Second, the 2 villages were finalizing a peace and alliance treaty. Negotiations had been ongoing for a while. It had taken a full month to finalize the details and arrange a meeting time and location. By convention, Terumi Mei should have traveled to Konoha to formally sign the agreement. Alternatively, Konoha, as the more dominant power, could have sent envoys instead of a Kage. But Tsunade, for whatever reason, wanted to meet Mei in person. And so, she found an excuse and slipped away from Konoha. Yet, as she laid eyes on the Mizukage for the first time, she felt something off. An inexplicable sense of unease settled in her chest. It was a feeling she had never experienced before. Mikoto, who was well acquainted with Tsunade's temperament, noticed immediately. She also realized that Tsunade had no idea what Orochimaru had been doing in Kirigakure. So why was she acting so tense? As for Mei, she, too, was puzzled. Because from the moment they locked eyes, she could sense hostility from Tsunade. Not the hostility born of political tension between villages, but the kind that came from women's intuition. Land of sound. Boom! A deafening explosion rocked the canyon. The ground trembled, sending shards of rock flying in all directions. Lord Reikage! Sir! Nozomi and Darui watched in horror as Orochimaru's wood clone unleashed a Susanoo rocket barrage, obliterating the terrain. The sheer force left a massive crater in the battlefield. They wanted to rush in, to help. But their bodies were battered, their injuries severe. Damn it! Darui clenched his fists, striking the ground in frustration. Orochimaru's power was so overwhelming that it felt hopeless. Could he really force the 4th Reikage to this level using only 5 wood clones? If his clones alone were this powerful, then how strong was his true body? What do we do now, Darui? Nozomi groaned as he pushed aside a boulder pinning his leg. He began healing himself while keeping a wary eye on the battlefield. The 4th Reikage had barely managed to withstand the full force of Susanoo's attack. His lightning armor had provided some protection. But what truly unsettled Nozomi was that Orochimaru himself hadn't even been fighting seriously. If this dragged on, there was only one possible outcome: death. Darui picked up his fallen sword, using it to steady himself as he rose. There's no other option, he muttered. Even if reinforcements arrive, they'll only suffer the same fate. His voice was heavy with resignation. We'll just have to fight to the end. Even though he had heard the rumors about Orochimaru's strength, experiencing it firsthand was an entirely different kind of fear. This wasn't human power. A gentle breeze swept across the canyon. Orochimaru's long, silky hair drifted in the wind. He stood motionless, quietly observing the battle, an unreadable expression on his face. Then, suddenly, his eyes narrowed. A shadow loomed overhead. Big bro, I'm coming in hot. A new voice boomed from above. Killer Bee, the 8-Tails Jinchuriki, entered the fight. A figure plummeted from the sky, swords glinting in both hands, aiming directly for Orochimaru. Heh! Finally. Orochimaru grinned and took a casual step back. Clang! 2 blades stabbed into the ground where he had just been standing. Orochimaru, one of the legendary Saiyajin. I've heard about you plenty. B's rapping accompanied a blindingly fast sword dance, his seven-sword style a whirlwind of slashes aimed at Orochimaru's vitals. But Orochimaru wasn't fazed. His golden snake pupils flickered. Behind them, hidden beneath a thin retinal membrane, lay his true Rinnegan. Using its enhanced perception, he sidestepped the first slash. And in an instant, the Kusanagi blade materialized in his grip, gleaming silver. I'm not much of a swordsman myself. His voice was almost amused. But I don't mind playing along. Ding! 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 Their blades clashed in rapid succession, sparks flying with each strike. Despite the relentless assault of 7 blades, Orochimaru deflected every attack with perfect precision. He hadn't used the Flying Thunder God technique. He hadn't deployed the truth-seeking orbs. Because Killer Bee had studied his teleportation abilities beforehand. If Orochimaru teleported away, Bee would anticipate his landing point and counter him immediately. Regular ninjutsu wouldn't be effective at this range either. And using Rinnegan abilities would make things too easy. Where was the fun in that? On a nearby mountaintop. Kakuzu, who had distanced himself from the battle, frowned as he observed the fight. The speed of those attacks. I can't even follow his swordplay. His expression was unreadable. Orochimaru is actually blocking all of that? Just then, the wind shifted. Snowflakes? No, paper. Dozens of tiny paper fragments fluttered through the air before quickly converging, taking the form of a woman adorned with a purple flower in her hair. HM? You're here. Kakuzu's voice remained impassive. Conan's expression was calm, yet piercing. Kakuzu, I heard you captured the 2 tails? Over there. Kakuzu jerked his chin toward the distant boulder where Orochimaru's python summon rested. Yujito lying atop it, conscious, but completely restrained. Humph. You weren't slow either. Conan turned her gaze toward the canyon. Who's fighting? Kakuzu crossed his arms. The 4th Raikage. And the 8 Tails Jinchuriki. 1 against 2 Kage-level shinobi? For the first time, Conan hesitated. She had heard rumors of Orochimaru's power, but she had never seen him fight directly. Was he truly capable of handling both opponents at once? Just as she was about to speak, a new figure descended from the sky. Pain. Conan turned to him. Pain, you arrived just in time. Want to help him? Pain glanced at the battlefield. His Rinnegan gleamed. Foreshadows? And they're still standing without taking action? He studied the scene carefully. Then, after a moment of silence, he smirked. No need. He's just blowing off some steam. Chapter 354, Why had Pain appeared here? As the leader of Akatsuki, he was responsible for summoning the Geto statue whenever a Jinchuriki was captured to begin the sealing process. Upon learning that Orochimaru had successfully captured the 2 tails, both he and Conan had immediately set out. Yet now, after hearing Pain's words, both Kakuzu and Conan were confused. Foreshadows? What foreshadows? Nothing. Just watch the battle, Pain replied calmly. He offered no further explanation. As a shinobi, there were secrets even within Akatsuki that he had no intention of revealing. Limbo, Border Jail, was an ability unique to the Rinnegan. With both eyes active, the user could generate 4 invisible clones, existing in a separate dimension, imperceptible to anyone without 6 paths power. These clones mirrored the exact strength and abilities of the original. Not only that, but they could freely shift between intangible and tangible states. Pain himself had never used this technique, but with his Rinnegan, he could now see it. Although he was curious about how Orochimaru had acquired such an ability, now was not the time for such discussions. On the battlefield, the fight had reached its peak intensity. The 4th Raikage was gasping for breath, struggling against 5 would-release clones. Darui and Nozomi had both sustained severe injuries. They couldn't even get close to Orochimaru. Their only role now was to support Reikage by alleviating some pressure from the Susanoo on the field. Suddenly, bam! Killer Bee was sent flying out of nowhere. Of course, Orochimaru planted his Kusanagi blade into the ground before him. Even now, I still can't match you in swordsmanship, can I? Taijutsu might lack the flashiness of ninjutsu or jinjutsu, but when honed to perfection, it could even injure a 6 paths level Madara. Orochimaru, however, was neither a taijutsu specialist nor a swordsman. His expertise lay elsewhere. If he relied on nothing but physical combat, he could overpower average taijutsu users with his sheer physical and mental durability. But against true masters like Killer Bee or Might Guy, he stood no chance. Killer Bee, still tumbling through the air, was momentarily stunned. What was that just now? Bam! Another invisible strike landed, sending him hurtling away again. Can't even see the attack. What's going on? Fool, ya fool. Even while being pummeled midair, Bee still rapped through his confusion. Bee! Watch out! A deep voice echoed within him. The Eight Tails had finally spoken up. Realizing the warning came too late, Bee snapped back to awareness. Just in time to see Orochimaru lunging toward him, Kusanagi's blade glinting in the dim light. The strike was aimed directly at his throat. Clang! 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 Thinking fast, Bee used the sword strapped to his body, planting them into the ground to propel himself backward, dodging in a series of rapid flips. As he did, red chakra began leaking from his body, surging like a wave. Within moments, Bee was completely enveloped in a blood-red cloak, a single tail forming behind him. Tailed Beast Cloak activated. When a Jinchuriki partially transformed, their body became encased in a tailed beast cloak. But there were two distinct forms of this transformation. A translucent red cloak, offering moderate enhancements to strength and defense, and a fully materialized, blood-red version, offering massive boosts to power, durability, and speed. Bee had now activated the materialized form. This cloak was tough enough that even the Kusanagi blade, renowned for piercing anything, wouldn't be able to cut through it. Your reaction speed is better than the Two Tails Jinchuriki, Orochimaru observed, retracting his sword. But a single tail still isn't enough. Enough talk. Come at me! With a burst of movement, Bee vanished in a cloud of dust. He had doubled in speed. Yet, Orochimaru remained perfectly still. Bam! Lariat! Bee, now cloaked in tailed beast chakra, slammed his arm into Orochimaru's chest with terrifying force. The shockwave sent Orochimaru flying backward, the sheer inertia behind the attack capable of shattering bones. But Bee's eyes widened. Orochimaru wasn't just unharmed. His attack had been stopped mid-motion, repelled by some kind of invisible force. Not only that, Bee could feel his chakra being drained upon impact. What the hell is this? Orochimaru exhaled softly, dusting off his cloak. I already told you, he mused. One tail isn't enough. Forget it, he smirked. Let's end this. Countless snakes erupted from Orochimaru's sleeves, coiling around Bee in an instant. Bee's instincts kicked in. Although entangled, he used his immense Jinchuriki strength to try and tear free. But Orochimaru simply raised his hand. Bancho Tenin. A crushing gravitational force yanked Bee straight into his grasp. Bee! Both the Eight Tails within him and Reikage from a distance shouted in alarm. But Orochimaru ignored them. A black sphere materialized in his hand. Truth-seeking orb, Black Rod. With a flick of his wrist, Bee was impaled midair. At the last moment, a massive tentacle surged forward, blocking the fatal strike. It was the Eight Tails, intervening just in time. But Orochimaru merely smirked. That won't help you. He discarded the first black rod. And in the blink of an eye, teleported behind Bee. Another black rod plunged into his back. Squelch! B's body convulsed as blood splattered from his wounds. Apologies. Orochimaru's voice was calm, yet merciless. But he wasn't finished. With perfect accuracy, he continued stabbing black rods into B's body. Each attack carefully missing his vital organs. The combined power of the six paths and the flying thunder god was utterly overwhelming. It was simple math. Any technique combined with flying thunder god instantly became broken. Imagine a missile launcher but with the ability to teleport anywhere in an instant. Now add six paths level abilities to that equation. It was completely unfair. How is this possible? The Eight-Tails voice echoed inside B's mind. B gritted his teeth through the pain. What's wrong, man? This power. It's the truth-seeking orbs. B's mind was still hazy. Truth-seeking what now? The Eight-Tails hesitated. That's the power of the Sage of Six Paths. B blinked. Who? A deep sigh reverberated through his mind. The Eight-Tails suddenly had the overwhelming urge to slap him. Chapter 355, The world of Naruto had its fair share of amusing characters. Jiraiya was one. Naruto was another. And without a doubt, Killer Bee was yet another. Though each of them could be serious and formidable in battle, their everyday personalities leaned toward the goofy and eccentric. The Eight-Tails had long since grown accustomed to Bee's antics and chose not to bother explaining the significance of the Sage of Six Paths to him. Besides, even if he wanted to explain it now, he wouldn't have the chance. Because the fire release, heavenly prison technique didn't just seal chakra, it also severed the connection between Bee and the Eight-Tails entirely. Orochimaru employed the same strategy once more. After sealing Bee's chakra, he retracted the truth-seeking orbs and restrained him using would release. Bee! The fourth Reikage let out a furious roar, pushing forward in an attempt to rescue his brother. Boom! But before he could reach Orochimaru, a Susanoo stepped in front of him, blocking his path. A single Susanoo would have been too slow to keep up with the Reikage's speed. But with 5 of them, the playing field was even. Whoosh! Orochimaru turned slightly in Reikage's direction, raising a hand. A truth-seeking orb condensed at his fingertips. Then, without hesitation, he launched it forward. Damn! This isn't good. Lord Reikage! Big bro! Everyone present realized the danger, but it was too late. Boom! A massive explosion erupted, shaking the entire battlefield. The ground itself shattered. The sheer force of the truth-seeking orb disintegrated stone, dirt, and debris into dust. The very air trembled under the intensity of the blast. A blinding white light followed, so bright that it forced everyone to shield their eyes. Damn it, that bastard. B clenched his fists in rage, his body struggling to move. But he had been struck by the truth-seeking orbs earlier. His body hadn't recovered yet. And on top of that, his chakra was still sealed. Quit struggling. Orochimaru barely spared him a glance. Without looking back at the battlefield, he summoned another giant python and began leading with Bee in tow. This time, no one pursued him. Powerful. Terrifying. Unstoppable. That was Orochimaru in the eyes of everyone present. Even Pain found himself momentarily taken aback, his Rinnegan reflecting shock. There was no doubt. This was true Six Paths level power. Though the truth-seeking orbs didn't create explosions as large as a tailed beast's bomb, their destructive capability far exceeded one. Just how powerful had Orochimaru become? Orochimaru, what kind of power do you have? Kakuzu couldn't hide his astonishment. He was certain, if that truth-seeking orb had been directed at him, he wouldn't have even had time to revive. Every single one of his 5 hearts would have been erased instantly. A power that surpasses the limits of bloodline abilities, Orochimaru answered casually. He had no intention of explaining the concept of Six Paths power to Kakuzu. Kakuzu let out a small breath. What a terrifying man. Of course, he hadn't expected a detailed answer. After all, no shinobi would freely disclose all their abilities, especially not to temporary allies. And truthfully, did Orochimaru even need allies? This is nothing. Let's go. Sealing the tailed beasts is the priority. Orochimaru didn't waste any more words and began leading the group away. Is it really okay to kill the Reikage? Conan's voice carried a hint of concern. Publicly eliminating a Kage could trigger an international crisis. If that happened, nations would unite in condemning Akatsuki. And the world would soon be drenched in blood. Unlike Pain, who had experienced the full horrors of war, Conan still hoped to avoid such extremes. Orochimaru's response was dismissive. Don't worry. He's not dead. Conan's eyes widened. Not dead? How is that possible? She had seen the radius of the explosion. She had felt the overwhelming destructive force of the truth-seeking orb. There was no way the Reikage could have survived. Was there? There's no need to be so shocked, Conan. Pain's voice cut in. Don't forget, there were still 5 Wood clones present. Conan suddenly understood. The 4th Reikage, alive. Yes, he had survived. And not just him, Darui and Nozomi were alive as well. Why? Because at the exact moment the truth-seeking orb detonated, Orochimaru's would release clone positioned itself in front of them. The Reikage's lightning armor provided partial defense. Darui and Nozomi had been far enough away from the explosion. And Susanoo clones, combined with their own defenses, had absorbed most of the impact. But make no mistake. They had barely survived. When the reinforcements from Kumogakure arrived, they found the 3 of them half dead. And as they surveyed the utterly devastated battlefield, the sheer level of destruction sent chills down their spines. How strong is Orochimaru? Terrifying. Even Reikage-sama was. No one dared finish the sentence. Capturing 2-tailed beasts at once. An impossible feat for most. For Orochimaru? It was just another mission. From the moment he sensed the 4th Reikage approaching, he had been waiting for Killer Bee to arrive. He had known exactly how it would unfold. Because if the Reikage was in trouble, Bee wouldn't just sit back and do nothing. Even though they weren't biological brothers, their bond was stronger than blood. So Orochimaru had waited. And in the end, he hadn't needed to wait long. Deep within a hidden cave in the land of rice fields, the Akatsuki gathered once more. It was time to extract the tailed beasts. 2 at once? Juzo let out a low whistle. Kakuzu, your efficiency is getting ridiculous. Yes, Sasori added. And if I recall correctly, these 2 are among the strongest Jinchuriki. Kakuzu's expression remained indifferent. I didn't do much. Orochimaru handled it alone. Juzo chuckled. Figures. With that technique of his, even if the Jinchuriki went all out, they wouldn't stand a chance. All right, enough talk. Pain's voice was firm. Everyone, focus on sealing the tailed beasts. Understood. And thus, the month-long process of extracting both 2 tails and 8 tails began. 1 month later. In the depths of a remote mountain, the Gedo statues slowly sank into the earth once more, its work completed. 6 figures in black cloaks remained. And before them, 2 nearly lifeless Jinchuriki. Yet, as Yujito lay there, gazing at Orochimaru, disbelief filled her weakening eyes. Why, she whispered. Why, did you save me? Chapter 356. Why had Orochimaru taken pity on her? Was this some kind of joke? After all, just earlier, he had mercilessly beaten her down using limbo, border jail. Then, after ripping the tailed beast from her, he had shown zero hesitation, not the actions of someone inclined to show mercy. And yet, despite all that, he was now saving her? For Yujito, a 19-year-old Jinchuriki who had always struggled to form meaningful friendships, Orochimaru's mocking tone caught her completely off guard. She had never heard someone talk to her like that before. Don't joke around. Yujito protested weakly. Truthfully, she couldn't understand anything about Orochimaru. How was he so powerful? How had he not only easily defeated her, but also overwhelmed both the fourth Raikage and Killer Bee as if it were nothing? And more importantly, why had he saved her after taking her tail beast? She had fully expected to be dead by now. This feeling. It was utterly baffling. Save your strength, Orochimaru's hoarse voice interrupted her thoughts. At that moment, his hand rested over her left chest, directly above her heart. Orochimaru himself seemed completely unaware, but Yujito, who was slowly regaining consciousness, felt an unexplainable unease. Yet, she said nothing. Because despite the strangeness of it all, she could feel that Orochimaru was actually healing her. It's really working? Watching the color return to Yujito's face, Conan's eyes widened in surprise. Was it really possible to save a Jinchuriki after their tailed beast was extracted? Orochimaru hadn't been joking? When the sealing ritual had concluded and the others had left, Orochimaru had claimed he could save them. At the time, Conan had doubted him. But now, she realized it wasn't impossible after all. Incredible. Even Pain was surprised. To rescue someone from certain death, without using the Rinne rebirth technique, should have been impossible. And yet, Orochimaru had done it. My theory was correct after all, Orochimaru muttered. When a Jinchuriki loses their tailed beast, their life force is extracted along with it. The key to saving them is simple: use yin-yang release to recreate that lost life force and replenish their body. Having confirmed this, Orochimaru withdrew his hand from Yujito and placed it over Killer Bee's chest instead. A Jinchuriki without their beast suffered symptoms similar to chakra exhaustion but far more extreme. It wasn't just chakra depletion. It was as if every single cell in their body had been drained dry. Their bodies had essentially lost trillions of active cells all at once. A normal person would never survive such trauma. But if massive amounts of life force were injected quickly enough, it was possible to save them. Then, by using yin-yang release to generate new cells, the Jinchuriki's body could stabilize before it collapsed entirely. You might be the only person capable of creating that level of vitality with yin-yang release, Pain admitted. He could use yin-yang release as well, but clearly, Orochimaru's mastery was on a completely different level. Orochimaru simply smirked. This is nothing, he said. This power is only useful in moments like these. If their injuries had been fatal or if they had already died, I'd have to use a different method. Why? Now able to speak, Killer Bee asked the same question as Yujito. His voice was weak, but his confusion was genuine. Why had Orochimaru captured them alive? Why had he taken their tailed beasts? And then why had he saved them? It made no sense. Orochimaru's response was casual. No particular reason. Just preserving resources. Preserving resources? Both Killer Bee and Yujito exchanged bewildered glances. What was he even talking about? But clearly, Orochimaru had no intention of explaining further. After finishing Bee's treatment, he stood up and dusted off his hands. All right, you're both out of danger now. With some rest, you should be back to full strength in a few days. As for your tailed beasts? His lips curled into a smirk. Forget about them. Then, turning to Pain, he motioned for them to leave. Let's go. And with that, they departed, leaving behind the still recovering Yujito and Killer Bee. 1 month later. The extraction of the 2 tails and 8 tails had taken a full month to complete. During this time, a lot had happened. But the biggest event was the rampage of the 4th Raikage. With his lightning chakra mode enhancing his already incredible durability, ordinary attacks had no effect on him. And Kumogakure's medical ninjas weren't incompetent either. However, even with advanced medical care, it had taken him 3 full days just to wake up after being hit by the truth-seeking orb. And 7 days before he could stand again. By the time he had regained mobility, Killer Bee was gone. And when he realized he had failed to rescue his brother, he exploded with fury. Gathering his forces, he marched toward Konoha, demanding an explanation. Why had their Jinchuriki been taken? At this point, the entire ninja world was watching. Everyone knew that Tsunade was Konoha's Hokage. And everyone knew that Orochimaru was her husband. Would Tsunade really be unaware of what Orochimaru had done? Of course not. This wasn't just a conflict between Kumo and Akatsuki. It was now a test of Konoha's stance. How Tsunade responded could determine whether or not a world war would erupt. For Tsunade, this situation was frustrating. In her view, Konoha should have already made peace with Kumo. But thanks to Orochimaru, the state of war had been sustained. And now, with Kumogakure demanding answers, she was left with no choice but to stall for time. She couldn't make any decisions without hearing from Orochimaru first. Because if she made one wrong move, the entire ninja world would be thrown into chaos. But of course, Orochimaru had anticipated all of this. With Zetsu feeding him intelligence, he quickly reached out to Tsunade with his response. When Mikoto handed her the letter, Tsunade's eyes widened in shock. What? He wants to start a war? Mikoto, just as stunned, snatched the letter and read it. Orochimaru's intentions were crystal clear. He was ready to go to war with Kumo. His plan was simple. He would lead his forces to crush Kumogakure and annex the Land of Lightning. All Tsunade had to do was deploy Konoha's forces to the border, applying pressure to Kumo. The rest, Orochimaru would handle. At the very end of the letter, he had written a single line. Trust me. I'll keep the casualties to a minimum. Tsunade took a deep breath, her hands clenched into fists. Finally, she made her decision. Pass down the order, first level combat readiness. Yes, ma'am. Chapter 357, there is a fundamental difference between maintaining a state of war and actively starting a war. Maintaining a warlike relationship means occasional border skirmishes, where injuries are common, but deaths remain rare under normal circumstances. However, declaring an all-out war? That would result in massive casualties. So, when news broke that Tsunade had ordered Konoha's military into combat readiness, the village's high-ranking officials, clan leaders, and elite jonin immediately convened for an emergency meeting. Each faction had their own stance on the matter. Launching a full-scale attack on Kumogakure? Why? Wasn't Konoha a peace-loving village? Wouldn't it be better to enjoy a period of peace instead of escalating into war? Unfortunately, they were just Konoha's shinobi. Now that the village leadership had already approved the decision and with Danzo actively backing it, they had no choice but to follow orders. Besides, Tsunade's command didn't explicitly declare war. Her order was simply to mobilize Konoha's forces to the border, placing pressure on Kumogakure. There was still a chance that a war could be avoided. With that reasoning, no one had grounds to object. Thus, after weeks of preparation, elite forces, led by Hatake Tsukumo and Namikaze Minato, marched toward Kumogakure. Both Tsukumo and Minato were renowned war heroes with exceptional leadership abilities. In fact, had Orochimaru not forced the third Hokage into retirement with his 3 consecutive victories, the next Hokage would have been either of them. And as for Hatake Tsukumo's fate? After much reflection, Orochimaru had finally uncovered the truth behind why Tsukumo had survived in this timeline. In the original timeline, Tsukumo's death was a result of political warfare between the third Hokage and Danzo. On the surface, Tsukumo had disobeyed orders to save his comrades, leading to major mission failure and public disgrace. Overwhelmed by shame, he ultimately committed suicide. However, ninja missions are classified, especially high-level operations that could result in major losses for the village. How had the details of such a top-secret mission leaked so easily? There was only one answer: Danzo had orchestrated it. During the Second Shinobi War, Tsukumo had become a living legend, rivaling Orochimaru in merit and prestige. Yet Danzo wanted Orochimaru to become Hokage. To achieve this, he needed to eliminate the only true competitor, Hatake Tsukumo. Tsukumo wasn't just a war hero, he was also aligned with the third Hokage. For Danzo, that was unacceptable. So, he set a trap. The mission failure was manufactured. The public backlash was engineered. Danzo even approached Tsukumo directly, feeding him poisonous words. Your reputation is outshining the Sannin. This is a problem for the future of Konoha. Your existence is hindering the will of fire. Seeing himself slandered and betrayed by his own village, yet unwilling to defect, Tsukumo had only one way out. Suicide. But in this timeline, Orochimaru's early departure from Konoha and Danzo's loss of power had completely altered Tsukumo's fate. He had survived. And now, he was leading Konoha's army to war. Kumogakure, Raikige's office. A messenger ninja rushed into the room, panic written across his face. Lord Raikige. Konoha's military is gathering at the border. It looks like they're preparing for a full-scale invasion. What? A full-scale invasion? The fourth Raikige froze. What the hell was going on? Orochimaru had captured his brother. Shouldn't he be the one declaring war? Why the hell was Konoha attacking first? Where was their justification? How? Why would Konoha start a war? A dark-skinned kunoichi standing beside him frowned. In every war, there must be a reason. Even if it's fabricated, there must be some kind of justification. Otherwise, how would any shinobi be willing to risk their lives? Did Konoha state any reason for their attack? She asked. The messenger ninja hesitated. We're still in contact with their forces at the border. They haven't given any formal explanation yet. Damn it! The Raikage clenched his fists. Was this what Konoha was really like? Had they finally revealed their true nature? At that moment, another ninja burst into the room, his voice urgent. Raikage-sama! Lord Killer Bee and Lady Yujito have returned. What? The fourth Raikige's head snapped up in shock. They came back? Just then, Bee, his 7 swords strapped to his back, and Yujito, her braids swaying with each step, walked into the office. Lord Raikage, Yujito greeted formally. Big bro! Bee grinned. Boom! The Raikage slammed his fists onto the desk, his eyes blazing. What the hell is going on? He turned to Bee. I chased after you, and you got captured, and now you just walk back and like it was a field trip? His brotherly concern was evident. Bee was his responsibility. He had trained him personally, and yet, because of this mess, his younger brother had been taken. And now, seeing him safe, his emotions conflicted between relief and rage. You better have a damn good explanation, Bee. Bee scratched his head. Big bro. This whole thing was weird as hell, yo. Even now, he was struggling to process what had happened. Orochimaru's Akatsuki organization was hunting tailed beasts? And yet, Orochimaru had somehow revived them after the extraction? That was insane. Even for the bizarre world of shinobi. Hearing this, the Raikige's expression darkened. Damn you, Orochimaru. Damn Konoha. So this was all part of your plan? The timing was too perfect. Orochimaru stripped their tailed beasts. Then, not long after, Konoha launched an invasion? Anyone could see that something wasn't right. As the Raikage, he growled, I'll defend my country and my village even if it kills me. His fists clenched. Prepare our forces. We're going to war. Yes, sir. Chapter 358. If Konoha was preparing for war, then the shinobi of Kumogakure wouldn't back down either. The fourth Raikage knew that no matter how powerful Konoha was, there was no way they could take down Kumo in a short time. And in the meantime, the other nations wouldn't just stand by and watch. After all, Konoha had no justifiable reason to attack this time. Everyone understood the old saying, when the lips perish, the teeth grow cold. If Kumo were truly destroyed, then the other villages wouldn't be far behind. What's more, Orochimaru's move to capture the tailed beasts had put every nation on edge. With that in mind, Sonogakure and Iwagakure would undoubtedly send reinforcements. A peace treaty with Konoha? That was meaningless. No one actually believed in peace treaties. Everyone knew that agreements forged on paper were nothing but temporary truces. The moment profit dictated otherwise, such documents were as worthless as scrap paper, easily torn apart. But even if Suna and Iwa wanted to help the Land of Lightning, would Orochimaru give them the chance? Of course not. By the time the attack was officially declared, Orochimaru had already made all the necessary arrangements. In the mountains west of the Land of Fire, deep within an abandoned orphanage, the members of the Akatsuki had gathered once again. This time, 6 out of the 8 members were present. Inside the cavern, a man in a straw hat and crimson armor lay sprawled on the ground, barely conscious, his body battered and broken. There was no doubt about it. This was Han, the Jinchuriki of the Five Tails, known for his mastery of steam release and raw physical power. However, his taijutsu paled in comparison to Might Guy's 8 gates. Instead, his true strength came from his control over the tailed beast. Jinchuriki? Against Kisame, wielding Samahata, that was barely a challenge. He never stood a chance. After a hard-fought battle, Kisame and Juzo had successfully subdued him. The ceiling is finally complete, someone muttered. Should we save him? Why bother? He keeps a low profile in Iwagakure, his influence is minimal. I say we keep him alive. He might be useful later. By the way, is it even possible to save a Jinchuriki after their tailed beast is extracted? I was wondering the same thing. For most, it's a death sentence. But Orochimaru can do it. No, only Orochimaru can do it without side effects. Seriously? That guy's a freak. How does it even work? Inyang release. Inyang release? Isn't that just a legend? A legendary technique used by a legendary shinobi. What's so surprising about that? Fair point. While the Akatsuki members casually discussed this, Orochimaru stepped away from the demonic statue of the outer path and approached Han. His raspy voice echoed softly. Better to save him. It's not difficult, and who knows? He may be of use later. Understood, Pain replied with a nod. Then, turning to the others, he continued, only 3 tailed beasts remain, 1 tail, 7 tails, and 9 tails. These will be our priority. Kisame, Juzo, Kakuzu, Pain called. You 3, head to the Land of Frost. Your strength may be needed for the next mission. The Land of Frost? Kakuzu frowned. Why there? You'll understand when you arrive. Someone will meet you there. Understood. Without hesitation, the 3 turned and vanished into the darkness. Sasori of the Red Sand also reported his position before slipping away. Meanwhile, Orochimaru used the Flying Thunder God technique to teleport Han a few kilometers away and began his treatment. Within minutes, Han's condition stabilized. Then, with a flicker, he reappeared in the cave. His gaze landed on Zetsu's spectral form. Zetsu, how's the task I assigned you? The messages have been delivered. No issues. Good. Orochimaru nodded. Then it's time. Let's go to the battlefield. Understood. Zetsu's shadowy figure melted away. Pain, Conan, you're coming with me. Inside an underground laboratory beneath the orphanage, Orochimaru issued his orders. Conan, take this army east of the Land of Frost. Conan's eyes widened in shock. This is insane. Lord Orochimaru, how many are there? She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Though there were few actual experimental pods, the facility was filled with health chambers each containing a soldier. Hundreds, no, thousands of them. Although they wore nothing but simple garments, the sheer bloodlust radiating from their ranks sent chills down her spine. Not too many, Orochimaru said casually. Only about 6 or 7,000 for now. But with this army, Iwagakure won't be able to reinforce Kumo. Incredible. If there are no issues, Move out immediately. Follow the path I've marked, travel east of the land of Taki. The strategic supplies will arrive later. Understood. But, Lord Orochimaru, what if we encounter shinobi from the land of Taki? Should we engage them? No need, Orochimaru said indifferently. I've already greeted the daimyo of these smaller nations. Under normal circumstances, they won't interfere. You greeted them? Conan was baffled. Orochimaru's influence extended that far? Even the lords of small nations obeyed him? Yes, he replied. Just follow the route I've planned. Of course, adjust accordingly if necessary. I understand. With that, Conan decisively turned and began organizing the troops. One by one, figures clad in simple garments emerged from the underground facility, stepping into the sunlight. Within 10 minutes, the once bustling laboratory was emptied. Only a handful of maintenance personnel remained. As Conan looked at the sheer scale of the army, she felt a wave of disbelief. 6,000 to 7,000 soldiers? From above, the sight was overwhelming, thousands of heads stretching as far as the eye could see. This one underground base had produced a force comparable to the entire population of Amagakure. A group of 6 per unit. Spread out and move forward. First stop, the land of Taki. Move out! Yes. The voices of over 6,000 warriors roared in unison, shaking the very air. And then, whoosh! Whoosh! Like locusts sweeping across the land, the army divided into over 1,000 squads, leaping across the terrain in tight formation, rapidly advancing toward the land of Taki. Unbelievable. Watching them depart, even Pain couldn't help but feel admiration. They were all created through technology alone. Would you rather build an army with manpower? Orochimaru chuckled. If so, I doubt I'd be able to form a force like this in my lifetime. Fair enough. Let's go, Pain. Time to deal with the Ninetales. Chapter 359. How many clone armies did Orochimaru have? No one knew for sure. But Tsunade had a pretty good guess. There were 5,000 to 6,000 in Otogakure, another 6,000 to 7,000 at the orphanage, and the laboratory east of Konoha, though built last, was the largest, housing around 10,000. 3 main bases. Over 20,000 troops in total. That was the size of an entire major shinobi village. Before sealing the Five Tails, Orochimaru had already sent orders to both me and Naoki, instructing them to merge the forces from their respective bases. He also had Nawaki prepare supplies, while Guren led a squad of clones to transport those supplies to the Land of Frost. Both me and Nawaki obeyed without question. Now, the 3 factions, Konoha, Kumogakure, and Orochimaru's clone army were on the move, each heading toward their respective battlefields. Everyone knew war was coming. Yet, Orochimaru remained unshaken. He left the laboratory, taking Pain with him to the orphanage. Nono, the orphanage director, was stunned when she heard Orochimaru's plan. A war. A pacifist at heart, Nono had been deceived into sleeping with Orochimaru. She had spent years managing his experimental base, believing it was all to ensure the safety of the orphanage and provide for war orphans. Deep down, she had always suspected what Orochimaru planned to do with his growing army, but now that the day had finally arrived, she still found it hard to accept. Why, she whispered, her voice trembling. Why start a war? To eliminate the problem at its root, Orochimaru replied, his tone eerily calm. He had known Nono since childhood, but they had never been close, mere acquaintances at best. Later, their relationship took an unexpected turn, though it was undeniable that Orochimaru had initially trained her with the intention of using her. The root, she echoed, confused. Yes, he said. There's no time to explain further. Where is Kushina? In the courtyard, playing with the children, Nono answered instinctively. She didn't fully understand Orochimaru's intentions, but what could she do to stop him? Nothing. All she could do was hope that the Orochimaru standing before her was still the same man who had founded Otogakure to protect war orphans. Kushina, Do you trust me? In a clearing deep in the forest, Orochimaru stood before Kushina, his expression unreadable. There were 5 people present: Orochimaru, Kushina, Pain, Nono, and Kushina's nearly 5-year-old daughter, Uzumaki Rage. Of course, Kushina said with a warm smile. She had doubted him once, back when he defected from Konoha. But now? Their daughter was already this old. There was no point in questioning trust anymore. Orochimaru's lips curled into a faint smirk. Then undo your seal. All right. Without hesitation, Kushina closed her eyes and entered her mindscape. Sealing techniques varied in complexity, and even identical seals could differ depending on the shinobi who applied them. Typically, only the original caster could undo a seal easily. Anyone else would need extensive research. Kushina's seal had been placed by Uzumaki Mito before her death. But Orochimaru had spent years studying the sealing arts of the Uzumaki clan. Figuring out how to unseal it had taken time, but not too much time. Of course, there was no method easier than having the Jinchuriki remove the seal themselves. Just like when Kurama tempted Naruto into loosening his seal in the past. Now, Kushina simply had to enter her mindscape, unlock the mechanism, and tear off the sealing talisman. It was that easy. Roar! A monstrous growl echoed through Kushina's consciousness. Kurama had sensed the weakening of the seal. The fox prowled restlessly, its killing intent palpable. Sweat beaded on Kushina's forehead. Then, boom! The seal shattered. A massive surge of chakra erupted outward as the blood-red-tailed beast cloak engulfed Kushina. But before it could go any further, Orochimaru's hand pressed firmly against her forehead, his palm glowing with the kanji for sit. Hokage-style 60-year-old technique, Kakuan entering society with bliss-bringing hands. The first Hokage's unique technique for suppressing tailed beasts. When Yamato used it, he required Hashirama's necklace to amplify its effect. But Orochimaru? He needed no such thing. Under the influence of the jutsu, the crimson-tailed beast cloak gradually faded. Kushina's breathing steadied, and her mind cleared. Let me stabilize your body first, Orochimaru murmured. Kaka! The ground trembled. On either side of Kushina, saplings burst through the soil, growing rapidly into towering trees. Vines shot out, binding Kushina's arms, restraining her. In a flash, Orochimaru retreated a dozen meters away, raising 2 fingers. Come out, Kurama. Tailed beast unsealing. Roar! Another deafening roar shook the clearing. The seal on Kushina's stomach twisted, morphing into an ink-black vortex. Then, Kurama's head emerged from the darkness, followed by its front paws, its hind legs, and finally, its massive tails. Boom! The full form of the 9 tails stood before them, towering 100 meters tall. Majestic. Terrifying. Meanwhile, Kushina collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Her clothes were drenched in sweat. Mother! Rage cried out in panic, trying to rush forward, but Nono held her back, whispering reassurances. Die! Kurama's wrath exploded. A violent chakra hurricane whipped through the forest, forcing everyone to brace themselves. With a ferocious snarl, Kurama swung its colossal claw straight at Kushina. Unlike Naruto's eventual relationship with the fox, Kushina had never formed a bond with it. To Kurama, she was nothing more than a captor. And if it could kill her, if it could eliminate the one suppressing it, it would finally be free. The monstrous claw descended. Then, boom! A massive black barrier materialized between Kurama and Kushina. The claw stopped inches away. No matter how much force Kurama exerted, it couldn't push past the shield. The beast's eyes widened in shock. Before it could react, countless black rods rained down from the sky. Slick! Each rod, nearly a meter long, pierced deep into Kurama's flesh, nailing it to the earth. These black receivers were the ultimate weapons against tailed beasts. Kurama thrashed violently, but it was futile. The more it struggled, the more chakra it lost. Within moments, it was completely subdued. Inside the shield, Orochimaru's raspy voice cut through the tension. "Don't be afraid," he murmured. "As long as I'm here, you'll be fine." He then turned to Pain. "Keep an eye on Kurama. I'll focus on stabilizing her." "Understood," Pain replied. "Leave it to me, sir." Chapter 360, The tailed beasts are fragments of the Ten Tails, and their destructive power is immense. When they go berserk, if there isn't a shinobi of Kage level strength or higher to subdue them, they can easily wipe out an entire village. What is the tailed beast's most powerful attack? Without a doubt, the tailed beast's bomb. Its explosive force is comparable to a nuclear detonation, utterly devastating. However, in the face of true would-release and dojutsu surpassing the Mangekyo Sharingan, a tailed beast is nothing more than a minor threat. For shinobi possessing would-release or powerful ocular jutsu, eliminating a tailed beast without a Jinchuriki is as simple as executing a single move. Gate of the Great God. Hokage-style 60-year-old technique, Kakuan entering society with bliss-bringing hands. The Mangekyo Sharingan. At this point, it's important to note that Jinchuriki and tailed beasts complement each other. While it may seem like the tailed beast is merely providing its Jinchuriki with power, in reality, the Jinchuriki is also protecting the beast. A tailed beast without a host can be controlled with just the Mangekyo Sharingan. Just like how Madara controlled Kurama in the past or how Obito manipulated it on the night of the Nine Tails attack. But against a Jinchuriki? Dojutsu alone isn't enough. The only way to win is through overwhelming raw power, as seen when Sasuke fought B. He thought his Mangekyo was invincible, until B nearly punched a hole through his chest. Right now, Kurama had been forcibly extracted from Kushina using Orochimaru's tailed beast unsealing technique. At this moment, it was a tailed beast without a Jinchuriki. And in this state, even Obito could easily suppress it, let alone Orochimaru and Pain. The instant Kurama emerged, Pain had already leaped into the air, launching a barrage of black rods. Tail. Claws. Head. Abdomen. Waist. Every vital point was impaled. These rods, fragments of the Ten Tails itself, had an absolute suppressive effect on tailed beasts. Kurama was completely restrained, unable to move despite its struggles. This power belongs to the old man. Kurama, who had been seething with rage just moments ago, suddenly paused. It wasn't the black rods piercing its body that caught its attention. It was the black shield that had blocked its earlier attack. That shield was composed of truth-seeking orbs, pure Six Paths chakra. Why was it in Orochimaru's possession? Truth-seeking orbs weren't just overwhelmingly powerful, they could change form freely. They could become black rods, staff weapons, the Totsuka spear. Seeing that same power now on Orochimaru of all people was shocking. But Orochimaru had no time to explain. "Your body is truly unique," Orochimaru murmured, focusing on Kushina. "Even after losing your tailed beast, you're still clinging to life." As he spoke, he channeled a stream of synthesized life energy into her body. The Uzumaki clan, their physical resilience was on a completely different level. Even B, a fellow Jinchuriki, didn't possess life force as strong as hers. This was the power of bloodline inheritance. Kushina let out a weak chuckle. "Oh? Are you saying you've studied plenty of Jinchuriki like me before?" "I've examined most of them except for the One-Tail's host." "And the others?" "3 are dead. 3 are still alive. 1 is currently without a Jinchuriki." "I see." Feeling her strength gradually returning, Kushina hesitated, then asked, "Sir, may I ask you something?" Orochimaru withdrew his hand, signaling that the treatment was complete. "Go ahead. Why, are you capturing the tailed beasts?" Kushina's eyes narrowed slightly. "With your power, unifying the shinobi world wouldn't require tailed beasts at all. So why bother?" Orochimaru was silent for a moment. Then, in a low voice, he asked, "Kushina, have you ever heard of the Ten Tails?" 10. Ten Tails? Land of Sound. Two figures moved swiftly through the dense jungle. Tsunade-sama, are we really supposed to be sneaking out like this? There's nothing wrong with it, Tsunade replied. I just want to see him. The technique Orochimaru described is beyond belief. How can I rest easy without seeing it for myself? Fair point. Hearing that, Mikoto sighed and continued following silently. Tsunade picked up her pace, and before long, Orochimaru's Otogekyure came into view. At the village entrance, a familiar figure was overseeing the loading of supplies. Short light brown hair. A face she knew well. A warm, sunlit smile. Nawaki? Tsunade's breath caught in her throat. This bastard. Orochimaru actually. Her voice trembled. It's unbelievable. Land of Wind, Tsunagekyure. The desert sun blazed mercilessly, casting long shadows over the village. The sky was thick with swirling sand. Inside the Kazekage's office, Raza paced back and forth, his face creased with tension. Lately, his anxiety had only grown worse. 2 reasons. 1. Suna's morale was at an all-time low. 2. The Land of Lightning's request for aid. During the Third Great Ninja War, the sudden reappearance of the first and second Hokage had forced Tsunagekyure into an unconditional surrender. That single event had shattered Suna's morale. And before they could recover, a secret message arrived from the Land of Lightning. According to their intelligence, Konoha was planning to annex the entire shinobi world. Their attack on Kumogakure was only the beginning. The Raikage was now urging Tsunagekyure to send reinforcements immediately. Raza felt trapped. What was he supposed to do? Send reinforcements? Engage Konoha in battle? With Suna's current morale, could they even win? And it wasn't as if this was their first time joining a coalition against Konoha. The results had never been in their favor. But if they didn't act? Once Konoha crushed Kumogakure, how long before they turned their attention here? What was the right move? Suddenly. Not good. Not good. Not good. A sand shinobi rushed into the office, gasping for breath. 3 times in a row, not good, his panic was unmistakable. Raza's brows furrowed. What are you panicking about? Orochimaru. Orochimaru is here. Orochimaru? Raza's heart skipped a beat. From the Raikage intel, he knew Orochimaru's power had evolved beyond recognition and that he was actively capturing tailed beasts. If he had come to Tsunagekyure. Could it be? His face darkened. Find Shio, tell her to hide Gaara immediately. The rest of you follow me. Yes, Lord Kazekage. At the entrance of Tsunagekyure, 4 figures stood against the backdrop of swirling sand. 3 of them wore black cloaks embroidered with red clouds. The last. Red-haired. Short-sleeved attire. There was no mistaking them. Orochimaru. Pain. Sasori of the Red Sand. Uzumaki Kushina. Chapter 361, Orochimaru, like a butterfly flapping its wings, brought great changes to the shinobi world with just a small motion. From the time of the First Great Ninja War, when he was only a few years old, he had already displayed unparalleled combat prowess and scientific research talent. During the Second Great Ninja War, these 2 talents caught the attention of other villages. And now, he has disrupted the balance of the entire shinobi world. Everyone is aware of his plans, yet no one can stop him? The 5 great shinobi villages were supposed to protect the remaining 2-tailed beasts. But because of Orochimaru's schemes, everything has changed. Currently, there are a total of 9 tailed beasts in the shinobi world. 8 of them are already in Orochimaru's hands, leaving only 1, still within Tsunagekyure. This is completely different from the Fourth Great Ninja War in the original events. The original war was a battle between the Akatsuki organization and the entire shinobi world. But now, the Third Great Ninja War has just ended, and every village is still recovering. With Orochimaru's support, Mei may have ascended to power, but there's no way she can lead Kirigakure into war. As for Konoha, there's no need to even mention it. And with Orochimaru having reached the 6 paths level, along with his army of clones, that leaves only 3 major villages. Who among them can take the offensive? Because of this, Raza was panicking. A kind of panic that made his heart race uncontrollably. He knew that the current combat strength of Sunagakure was far inferior to that of Kumogakure. If even the Kumo shinobi couldn't protect their own Jinchuriki, how could the shinobi of Sunagakure possibly protect Gaara? Orochimaru, I originally thought you would sneak in and capture Shikaku. But I never expected you to act so openly. It's truly surprising. A low voice came from the red sand scorpion, lying on the ground. After dealing with Kurama, Orochimaru had brought Pain to the Land of Wind to capture Shikaku. In any case, the orphanage was close to Konoha's border, not far from here. A short detour wouldn't affect his command of the war. Upon arriving, Orochimaru made no further moves. He simply stood outside Sunagakure, waiting for the village to respond. Sasori was genuinely surprised by Orochimaru's direct approach. Based on the information he had, Orochimaru was an extremely cautious person. A man like that wouldn't normally use such a straightforward and forceful method. Orochimaru's actions now were not like those of a legendary shinobi, but rather like a reckless brute. Hearing Sasori's words, Orochimaru smirked. With absolute power, why would I need to be sneaky? The 3 of us alone are enough to threaten Sunagakure, wouldn't you agree, Pain? Wrong. Oh. You alone are enough, Pain said calmly. Pain understood his own strength well, yet Orochimaru was clearly stronger than him. So while his words might have sounded like flattery, they were, in fact, the truth. Whoosh! 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 As they spoke, Raza led 100 shinobi rushing out from Sunagakure's entrance. The moment they appeared, they surrounded the 3 of them without hesitation. You! Raza was briefly stunned, then his expression turned cold. Sasori of the Red Sand? It's surprising to meet under these circumstances, Raza. No, I should call you the 4th Kazekage now. Sasori flicked his scorpion tail nonchalantly. Raza was only 5 years older than Sasori, and there had never been a superior-subordinate relationship between them. And Sasori was someone who had already abandoned all attachment to life. A person who had lost all purpose and meaning. Someone like that no longer cared about much, whether it be loyalty, honor, or even his own life and death. So, upon seeing Raza, he felt no particular emotion at all. Enough nonsense, Sasori. Raza said solemnly. Tell me, what is your purpose in coming to Sunagakure? As a once genius puppet master of this village, you suddenly return after defecting, and you're associating with Orochimaru? I doubt it's anything good, right? Purpose? I have no say in this matter. What do you mean? Raza was surprised by Sasori's response. Just then, Pain took a step forward. 4th Kazekage-sama, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Pain, and I am the current leader of the Akatsuki organization. Pain? The leader of Akatsuki? Raza frowned. He knew that Orochimaru was a member of Akatsuki, but he never expected the organization's leader to be this person. Could this man not only command Sasori but also subdue Orochimaru? Pain nodded. The reason we're here today should be very clear to you, Lord Kazekage, correct? I don't quite understand, Raza feigned ignorance. Shikaku. Pain was unfazed by the act. We are only here for Shikaku. As long as you hand it over, we promise not to harm your village. What? Are these guys insane? They think just a handful of people can threaten us? Even with Orochimaru. Boom! Before the Sunagakure shinobi could finish their words, a terrifying, enormous figure suddenly appeared before them. With its massive form, sharp fangs, and 9 enormous tails swaying in the wind, it exuded an overwhelming presence. This is... Kurama? How is this possible? Is this a joke? Kurama? Shit, retreat. The sudden appearance of Kurama made the Sunagakure shinobi tremble in fear. Even a large shinobi village feared the destruction a rampaging tailed beast could bring. Once a tailed beast went berserk, death and devastation would follow. And now, Kurama had appeared right before them. How could they not be terrified? But what was even more terrifying was the fact that it seemed to have been summoned by Orochimaru. Seeing Kurama appear, Raza was also shocked. Why is Kurama here? And, wait. Raza's expression darkened. Kurama hadn't attacked immediately. It simply lay there, grinning, as if waiting for Orochimaru's command. Could Orochimaru control a tailed beast? No, that's not right. This is... Raza's eyes widened in shock. Because he had just noticed, Kurama's eyes were shaped like lavender ripples? Chapter 362, Kyuubi's eyes had taken on a ripple-like pattern? There was no doubt, Kyuubi was being controlled, and it was through the power of the Rinnegan. Whether it was a tailed beast or a summoned creature, once controlled by Dojutsu, its eyes would take on the shape of its controller's pupils. Just like Kyuubi at this moment, its eyes had become Rinnegan. This phenomenon had occurred multiple times in the original events, such as when Sasuke controlled Manda to shield himself from Deidara's explosion, when Obito controlled Kyuubi to attack Konoha, and when all of Pain's summoned creatures displayed the same transformation. Speaking of controlling summons with Dojutsu, it was necessary to mention the art of summoning. Logically, a shinobi could only sign a contract with one species of summoned creatures in their lifetime. It was impossible to form blood contracts with multiple species at the same time. But there was one exception. That exception was shinobi who possessed Dojutsu. Shinobi with powerful eyes could summon two or even more different types of creatures simultaneously. Even though they couldn't sign a second blood contract, they could use their Dojutsu to control other summoned creatures, effectively allowing them to summon multiple species at once. This was exactly how Pain controlled his summons and how Sasuke commanded his hawk. To put it simply, Orochimaru's blood contract covered all the snakes in Ryuchi Cave, meaning he could only summon snakes. If he wished to summon another species, he would have to use Dojutsu to control an entirely new creature. Once controlled, he could then summon that new species in addition to his original contracted summons. However, the second species of summoned creatures would consist only of individually controlled beings, not an entire race bound by a summoning contract. Back to the present. Raza was still in shock as he looked at Kyuubi, controlled by the Rinnegan. After all, the ability to control a tailed beast with Dojutsu was an extremely terrifying prospect for other villages. Rinnegan. He turned his gaze toward Pain. So that's how it is. As Kazekage, he was naturally well informed. Even if he had never seen the Rinnegan before, he had at least heard of it. These were the legendary eyes of the Sage of Six Paths. Lord Kazekage, for the sake of your village's safety, please consider Lord Orochimaru's proposal. A gentle yet firm voice echoed through the battlefield. Hearing this, Raza frowned. Who are you? My name is Uzumaki Kushina, the former Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. What? You are Kyuubi's Jinchuriki? This time, Raza was truly stunned. The name Uzumaki Kushina might not have meant much to him, but the title Kyuubi's Jinchuriki certainly did. There was no doubt, Kushina had willingly followed them to Sunagakure. Having barely recovered, she had entrusted her daughter to Nono and pleaded with Orochimaru to let her come along. Her sole purpose was to temper Orochimaru's bloodthirsty tendencies and advocate for peace. And in truth, she had succeeded. Because of her presence, Orochimaru had indeed restrained himself from killing indiscriminately. Seeing her striking red hair, Raza had no choice but to believe her claim. However, what puzzled him was, if the tailed beast had been extracted, why was Kyuubi's Jinchuriki still alive? Of course, now was not the time to dwell on that. The most pressing issue was whether he should yield to Orochimaru. Gaara was his son, that was undeniable. But as a shinobi, he had always been prepared for sacrifices. If Gaara were to die, he might grieve for a moment, perhaps even shed a few tears. But if the village fell, it would mean that he, as Kazekage, had failed. Without a village, there would be no nation. Without a nation, there would be no family. The consequences of failure would be far worse than losing his son. Should he surrender Shikaku? That might mean only losing a single-tailed beast, but no one could predict what further consequences would follow. But if he refused, just Kyuubi alone was enough to destroy them. Not to mention, standing beside Orochimaru were Sasori, Pain, and the Rinnegan itself. Could Tsunagakure really stand against these three powerhouses and Kyuubi? Raza felt his thoughts spinning in turmoil. Sasori's combat ability was at most on par with his Uchiyo's. But Orochimaru had already proven capable of effortlessly eliminating the Raikage and a Jinchuriki who could possibly stop him. If a battle broke out, and Pain joined the fray alongside the massively destructive Kyuubi, the outcome was obvious. Damn it, this guy. Lord Kazekage, you must not give in. That's right, Lord Kazekage. Let's fight them together. Idiot, stop spouting nonsense, that's Kyuubi. Kyuubi? So what? As long as we attack together. Shut up. Orochimaru is controlling Kyuubi. Doesn't that tell you everything? Damn it. Hearing his subordinate's frantic arguments, Raza gritted his teeth, clenching his fists tightly. This was the crushing weight of absolute power. In the past, it had been the first and second Hokage. Now, it was Orochimaru, Pain, and Kyuubi. Was the shinobi world truly doomed to kneel before Konoha once more? Meanwhile, as Orochimaru was using his overwhelming power to force Raza into submission, a group of Konoha shinobi had arrived at the seaside border of the Land of Lightning. There were about 100 of them, all clad in ANBU masks. Leading them was a man with bandages wrapped around his right arm and eye. As they gazed at the massive factory before them and the dense ranks of clone soldiers, the shinobi of Konoha were left in shock. An army of this scale, it's enough to dominate any large-scale war. Unbelievable, this is simply too powerful. As expected of Lord Orochimaru. Indeed, this isn't something an ordinary man could accomplish. The members of Ru were trained to remain silent, yet even they couldn't hide their astonishment at the sight of Orochimaru's base and the sheer number of clones. Clones. That word alone was enough to instill shock. It was a concept beyond the understanding of ordinary shinobi, let alone the fact that these clones possessed combat abilities equal to their own. Danzo himself was even more thrilled. Because in addition to the forces Conan had taken to the Land of Frost, there were still more than 10,000 clones here. And at this very moment, all 10,000 of them were waiting for Danzo's command. He had waited far too long for this moment. This man actually used technology to create such an army? Unbelievable. Whoosh! Just as he finished speaking, a young man in a white robe suddenly appeared before him. Who? The sudden arrival immediately put the rude shinobi on high alert. Danzo, however, remained unfazed. Raising his hand to stop his subordinates, he looked at the young man and spoke in a solemn tone. You must be Orochimaru's son, correct? My name is Mi. The young man smiled gently and bowed respectfully to Danzo. As per my father's orders, I am here to assist Danzo-sama in infiltrating Kumogakure. Chapter 363, only 3 people knew the truth about his creation. Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Kushina. Aside from these 3, everyone else believed that he was the biological son of Tsunade and Orochimaru. Danzo was no exception. This time, after receiving intel that Orochimaru had sent me over, Danzo made his move, arriving here to assist in the battle. Hearing Mi's words, Danzo frowned. Infiltrating Kumogakure? What do you mean? Danzo-sama, just follow me, and you'll understand. With that, Mi turned and led the way. Danzo hesitated for a moment before signaling his subordinates to follow. The plan, according to my mother's wishes, is a forced landing operation. We need to transport this army to the Land of Lightning. A pincer attack from both the front and rear? Danzo said solemnly. I see what you're aiming for, but the shinobi of Kumo aren't fools. Even a six-man team would be quickly detected and eliminated, let alone an army of this scale. Danzo-sama is correct, which is why we'll be utilizing some external assistance. External assistance? Yes, in the form of special technological advancements. Under Mi's guidance, Danzo and his subordinates entered a massive factory near the coast. Inside, they saw clones moving about, along with many citizens, all engaged in various tasks. Some were welding, others were inspecting machinery, tightening screws, everyone was busy at work. This place is amazing. Unbelievable. This is my father's shipyard. Shipyard? Danzo glanced around. Are you planning a naval assault? Although Kumogakure was situated at a high altitude, most of the Land of Lightning's borders faced the sea. From a strategic standpoint, launching an attack from the sea was certainly possible. However, that still didn't solve the most fundamental issue. With an army of this size, avoiding detection would be nearly impossible no matter which route they took. Yet, Mi and the others seemed unconcerned, leading them deeper into the shipyard. Meanwhile, outside Sunagakure, a small child with black eyes clutched a stuffed bear, standing before everyone. The childhood of a Jinchuriki was rarely peaceful. As the host of Shikaku, Gaara had faced nothing but cold indifference from the world since birth. At this moment, only 5 years old, he trembled in fear, hiding behind Yoshimaru as he faced the gathered shinobi of Sunagakure, including his distant, unfeeling father. Orochimaru, can you keep your promise? A voice filled with age and experience rang out. Stepping forward from her reclusive life, Chiyo gazed at Orochimaru. Having long since withdrawn from active duty, she now stood beside her younger brother, Ebizo. Had it not been for the dire circumstances threatening the village, she would not have appeared here. Hearing Chiyo's words, Orochimaru smirked. It's not like you have any other choice. Of the 5 great shinobi villages, Sunagakure may have vast territory, but it is also the poorest. Were it not for certain considerations, I wouldn't have bothered coming here at all. Simply put, I have no interest in killing you. If you surrender, not only will casualties be kept to a minimum, but you will also gain access to better living conditions and resources. Consider it carefully. Of course, I advise you to think wisely. If you insist on resisting, I will have no choice but to slaughter you all. Do not doubt my words, I am fully capable of doing so. The power of the 6 paths. It was an ability more broken than any other ninjutsu. Take the truth-seeking orbs, for example. They negated all forms of ninjutsu, and ordinary shinobi would be injured simply by touching them. An existence of such overwhelming power, how could anyone be allowed to challenge it? At this moment, the shinobi of Sunagakure had no saviors like Naruto or Sasuke to rescue them. Hearing Orochimaru's words, Chiyo, Raza, Ebizo, and the other high-ranking officials of Sunagakure fell into deep thought. Even the other shinobi present hesitated. Bringing out a 5-year-old Gaara was, in itself, a sign of surrender. And it wasn't just because of Orochimaru's display of power. He had summoned 2 coffins. Inside one was the 3rd Kazekage. Inside the other, the 2nd Tsuchikage. The moment these 2 figures appeared, the truth became undeniable. Orochimaru had been the one responsible for using Edo Tensei during the 3rd Great Ninja War. With such a powerful Edo Tensei army, along with Kyuubi and Orochimaru himself, Sunagakure stood no chance. There was no option but surrender. Whether their submission was genuine or merely temporary was another matter. Hand Gaara over to me, Orochimaru said. As for your formal surrender, discuss it with your daimyo. There's no rush. He gestured toward Gaara with a slight motion of his fingers. With tensions rising in Kumogakure, his forces and Tsunade's had their own battles to fight. If Sunagakure surrendered now, Orochimaru had no available personnel to oversee the village. With visible hesitation, Yoshimaru watched as little Gaara, his forehead still unmarked by the word love, timidly walked toward Orochimaru. Orochimaru wasted no time. Using the same method he had employed to extract Kyuubi, he began removing Shikaku. It was a method both efficient and swift. Its only drawback was that it required the Jinchuriki's cooperation along with some form of suppression for a fully realized tailed beast. But with 2 pairs of Rinnegan present, there was no need to worry about subduing a tailed beast. The only requirement was Gaara's passive cooperation. Why hadn't Orochimaru used this method on the Jinchuriki of other villages? Because unlike Gaara, the others weren't so obedient. Raza knew exactly how terrifying Edo Tensei was. He had witnessed the devastation Kyuubi could bring. He had seen Orochimaru crush the Raikage in B. He understood the situation. And so, he compromised. Because resisting would only lead to pointless deaths. Raza was a Kage-level shinobi. And while Kage were strong, they paled in comparison to the Rinnegan. Against 6 paths level power, there was no comparison. A fully realized Susanoo had allowed Madara to dominate all 5 Kage. What chance did they have against Orochimaru, who wielded even greater power? For an ordinary shinobi, there were only 2 abilities capable of harming a 6 paths level opponent, the 8 Gates and Senjutsu. But unfortunately for them, both of those abilities belonged to Konoha. Want to catch up on old times? Pain's voice broke the silence, directed at Sasori. Sasori glanced at Chiyo. There's no need. Then let's go. With that, they departed. Chapter 364. In the early stages of a shinobi war, battles rely on tactics and intelligence. It can be said that this stage still retains the essence of ninja combat. But at the Super Kage level, tricks and strategies become meaningless. At that level, the only thing that matters is absolute power. No matter what kind of ninjutsu or technique one possesses, a single slash of sword energy from a complete Susanoo could reduce them to dust in an instant. Raw strength trumps all. That is the undeniable truth. And so, Raza had no choice but to surrender. After Orochimaru extracted Shikaku and ensured Gaara's survival, the 9-tailed beasts were finally gathered. Kushina, who had insisted on following them, finally felt relieved about Orochimaru. In her mind, Orochimaru had always been the most ruthless of the Sannin, someone who reveled in combat and experimentation. But now, she realized something. It wasn't that Orochimaru was avoiding battles with ordinary shinobi, he simply no longer cared to fight them. Perhaps, this was the mindset of someone who had reached a certain level of power. After escorting Kushina back to the orphanage, Orochimaru immediately set off for the battlefield with Pain and Sasori. And with that, the war had officially begun. At Iwagakure, Inoki, the Tsuchikage, had received intelligence confirming that Orochimaru was attacking Kumogakure. As expected, he immediately deployed an army of IWA shinobi for reinforcements. Inoki knew very well that if Kumogakure fell, Iwagakure would be next. Even though he had signed a peace treaty with Konoha, he could not afford to stand idly by. The ever-changing alliances and rivalries between villages had never been clearer than at this moment. After all, IWA and Kumo had just been at war. But now, with Konoha threatening their interests, they were suddenly willing to cooperate without hesitation. But would it even matter? Not at all. If IWA wanted to reinforce Kumo, they had 2 options. 1. Take the sea route. 2. Pass through the Land of Frost. But the Land of Frost was already occupied by an army of clones led by Akatsuki. How were they supposed to get through? Whoosh! 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 A group of IWA shinobi in khaki-colored vests quickly leaped toward the Tsuchikage's office. Tsuchikage-sama. Many enemy shinobi claiming to be from Odogakure have appeared in the Land of Frost. They are intercepting us. We're unable to reinforce Kumo. Tsuchikage-sama. We have confirmed Akatsuki among them. Tsuchikage-sama. Those Akatsuki members are too strong. Even Lord Katsuchi is struggling. Tsuchikage-sama. Amagakure is mobilizing troops. They seem to be preparing to attack us. One crushing report after another reached Inoki's ears. Odogakure? Where the hell did Otogakure come from? Which country even recognized Otogakure as a legitimate shinobi village? How was Akatsuki now involved with Otogakure? And why was Amagakure suddenly trying to attack Iwagakure as well? Individually, each of these events might have seemed like a coincidence. But together, Inoki immediately realized something was wrong. Prepare for battle. Inoki commanded. We're heading to the battlefield. In the land of frost. On a high mountain overlooking the battlefield, several figures in black cloaks adorned with red clouds stood watching. Behind them lay a temporary base created by the clone army. Akatsuki, the most infamous rogue organization in the shinobi world. Many of them should have been dead. But thanks to Orochimaru's intervention, they were now pawns in this war. These were not people who bowed to others. Many had joined Akatsuki simply to witness the unknown. And in this organization, they had indeed seen things beyond their imagination. The Rinnegan, the Gedomazo, and now, Orochimaru's 6 paths level power. It's unbelievable. These clones were all created by Orochimaru's technology? A deep voice rumbled. Juzo wore a look of admiration. This clone army required no training. The moment they were activated, they possessed the combat ability of elite Jonin. And even more terrifying, they all had the Sharingan. With this kind of technology, does the shinobi training system even matter anymore? Juzo muttered. Even if you train 200 children for 15 years, there's no guarantee you'll produce 100 Jonin. But Orochimaru? Give him half a year and the right equipment, and he could mass-produce thousands of Jonin. It's a terrifying ability, Kisame remarked indifferently, but it's not our concern. Our only job is to carry out Pain's orders. You're surprisingly laid back about this, Juzo scoffed. By the way, Kisame, when you joined Akatsuki, was it really because that little girl Terumi May became Mizukage? Do you even need to ask? Kisame replied flatly. When he had left Kirigakure, Yagura, the 4th Mizukage, had been in power. He had once served under Fuguki Suikazan, the previous wielder of Samahata. There was no chance either of them would have become Mizukage. So aside from them, who else in Kirigakure was even qualified? No one. Except for Terumi May. Before Juzo could say anything else, a yin-yang-faced figure emerged from the ground. Zetsu. Sorry to interrupt. HM? What is it? Tsuchikage Inoki is on his way here. Pain wants you all to be careful. If you encounter him, do not engage directly, just delay him until reinforcements arrive. Understood. At Kumogakure. Given the current crisis, the 4th Reikage could no longer afford to send troops to guard the borders. He had no choice but to focus all defenses on Kumogakure itself. Hearing of Konoha's advance, he prepared for war. But surprisingly, Konoha did not attack. There had been no direct clashes between Konoha and Kumo, yet. Because at this moment, it was clear that Kumogakure stood no chance of defeating Konoha's forces. If Konoha wasn't making a move, Kumo would certainly not be the one to act first. Reikage-sama. The chakra cannon is ready and can be fired at any time. A Kumo shinobi knelt before the 4th Reikage, reporting with urgency. Good! The 4th Reikage nodded, his gaze locking onto the massive fortress at Kumogakure's highest peak. Without the tailed beasts, this is our village's final trump card. B! What's the status of our defenses? All set up, bro. Good. Just as the Reikage felt somewhat reassured. Reikage-sama. Bad news! A Kumo shinobi rushed to the top of the fortress. What happened? The Reikage frowned. A large force of shinobi wearing Otogakure forehead protectors has appeared in the north. They are marching toward our village. What? How many? Estimated to be over 10,000. Chapter 365. More than 10,000? Hearing that number, the 4th Reikage was completely stunned. How is that even possible? Even among the 5 great shinobi villages, the total number of shinobi barely exceeded 20,000. Where did Otogekyur manage to find so many troops? What's going on? Where did these guys come from? And why are they appearing in the north? The fourth Reikage roared in frustration. The north was close to the sea, while Otogekyur, located in the Land of Sound, lay south of Konoha. The two locations were in completely opposite directions. How had they managed to bypass the front lines and appear behind Kumogakyur? More importantly, how had such a massive force gone completely undetected until they were practically at the village gates? Report. Reikage-sama. A Kumo shinobi hurriedly knelt before him. The enemy appeared suddenly. The exact reason is still unknown. Unknown? Then find out. Yes, sir. Reikage-sama. Reikage-sama. This is bad. The fourth Reikage's irritation deepened. What now? He snapped. This was the phrase he hated hearing the most lately. Because none of the reports had been good news for Kumogakyur. Tailed beasts. Two tailed beasts have been spotted west of the village, moving toward us. What? Tailed beasts? Two of them? More reports kept flooding in, each more alarming than the last. Konoha alone was already enough to put Kumogakyur on edge. Now, an army of Otogekyur shinobi had suddenly appeared. And now, two tailed beasts were approaching? Kumogakyur was in danger. 2 kilometers west of Kumogakyur. Two colossal tailed beasts moved slowly across the landscape. One was a fox with 9 tails. The other was a tanuki with violet markings. Both of them had lavender, ripple-shaped pupils. Whether in terms of sheer numbers or top-tier combat power, we hold an overwhelming advantage. Standing atop Kyuubi's head, Pain gazed forward calmly. The fourth Reikage should surrender, shouldn't he? This war was nothing more than an utter rout. For Kumogakyur, the outcome was already decided. There was no suspense. Watching the scene unfold through the perspective of an invisible spy fly, Orochimaru chuckled. It won't be that easy. The fourth Reikage has a fiery temper. He won't surrender unless he's completely backed into a corner. For example, look at what they've prepared. They even brought out a chakra cannon. It's clear they have no intention of surrendering. Orochimaru casually handed Pain a small display screen, about the size of a mobile phone. The screen displayed an aerial view of the chakra cannon, positioned at Kumogakyur's highest point. Chakra cannon? Pain glanced at the display with mild curiosity. Taking the screen from Orochimaru, he observed the massive weapon carefully. I don't know how advanced their research is, but based on its design, at minimum, a single blast would have the destructive power of a tailed beast bomb. Pain's expression barely changed, though a flicker of surprise crossed his face. The lowest level is already on par with a tailed beast bomb? Tailed beast bombs could level an entire battlefield with a single shot. And this weapon? Compared to a tailed beast bomb, it's only stronger, not weaker. The only downside is its size. It's too bulky and lacks mobility. Orochimaru smirked. Otherwise, they would have already deployed it in battle. So, if we want to crush their will to resist, the first step is destroying that weapon. You want to do it, or should I? Forget it. I'll take care of it. Before Pain could respond, Orochimaru unleashed his chakra wings, shimmering with 5 elemental attributes, and soared into the sky. Pain could also use Shinra Tensei to fly, but his movement wasn't nearly as agile as Orochimaru's peacock method. That made Orochimaru the ideal choice for this stealth mission. Pain, I'm leaving the rest to you. Understood. No need to worry. The fourth Reikage was furious. He was always known for his unyielding and indomitable spirit. But at this moment, he wasn't just a warrior, he was a Kage. And as a Kage, he had to prioritize the village's survival. Seeing so many enemies closing in on Kumogakyur, he couldn't afford to act recklessly. If this had been a normal battle, Kumogakyur might have stood a chance. Even if they were outnumbered, they could still use their mountainous terrain to defend the village. But the problem was: 1. Kumogakure no longer had its tailed beasts. 2. Their top-tier combat power was significantly weaker than the enemy's. They simply could not hold out. After receiving countless reports, the Reikage quickly made a tactical decision. First, they would deal with the two-tailed beasts to the west. His shinobi could still hold the line against the forces from Konoha and Otogakure, but the tailed beasts could not be stopped without Kage-level fighters. Just as he was preparing to head west with B and a group of elite shinobi, he saw something in the sky. Reikage-sama, that is. Zooming in with their monoculars, the Kumo shinobi's faces turned pale. A pale face came into view. Orochimaru? Shit! Not good. The Reikage reacted instantly, leading his men into a full retreat. However, Orochimaru's peacock method had been refined and enhanced. His flight speed was now as fast as Inoki's in his prime. No matter how fast the Reikage was, he was still on the ground. There was no way he could outrun Orochimaru in the air. The roaring wind howled around Orochimaru's ears. The chakra cannon came into view. Orochimaru smirked. This feeling of absolute dominance, it's really quite nice. Conan's wings were made of white paper, giving her an almost angelic presence. But Orochimaru's wings, formed from pure chakra and imbued with elemental energy, made him look like a fallen demon god. The Kumo shinobi operating the chakra cannon finally spotted him. They immediately swiveled the barrel toward him. But this massive cannon moved too slowly. It still needed time to charge up chakra. How could they possibly hit Orochimaru? With a few rapid maneuvers and a flying thunder god teleport, he easily dodged its aim. Attack! Attack! Don't let him get close. Hurry up! Damn it! He's too fast, we can't lock on. Shit! He's coming! Brace yourselves. From the sky, a truth-seeking orb expanded into a massive shield, deflecting all kunai, shuriken, and jutsu. At the same time, another truth-seeking orb formed. Whoosh! It launched forward, straight toward the chakra cannon. It's over, it's really over. Orochimaru, you bastard. The fourth Reikage let out a furious roar. Boom! A massive explosion shook all of Kumogakure. At that moment, the entire world seemed to fall silent. Chapter 366. The chakra cannon had the power to obliterate the moon, but its material composition was naturally not very strong. No matter how sturdy it was, it stood no chance against a truth-seeking orb. How terrifying was the truth-seeking orb? In the original story, even Minato's custom-made flying thunder god kunai was instantly shattered the moment it made contact with Obito's black rods, which were merely extensions of the truth-seeking orb. Even Susanoo would be blown apart if caught in the center of its explosion. So how could Kumogakure's chakra cannon possibly withstand such a devastating attack? As the cannon was reduced to a pile of useless scrap, the fourth Reikage was furious. This weapon had been Kumogakure's last source of pride, and it had been destroyed so effortlessly. Although the explosion didn't completely obliterate it, the cannon was completely unusable now. The fourth Reikage had always known that Orochimaru was powerful. He had known that Orochimaru could fly. But the problem was, no one in Kumogakure could fly. Even if they could, no one could withstand Orochimaru's attacks. Not even him. Watching Orochimaru hovering in the sky, his chakra wings flickering with energy, the fourth Reikage felt an overwhelming urge to punch him to death. But even that was impossible. Above, truth-seeking orbs had transformed into an impenetrable shield, covering Orochimaru's blind spots. Fourth Reikage, surrender. Orochimaru's lips curled into a playful smile. If you resist, you'll only be sacrificing your subordinates for nothing. Shinobi. Some feared death, and some did not. But in this profession, those who did not fear death far outnumbered those who did. The fourth Reikage was not the type to fear death. If he was, he would never have become a shinobi in the first place. Orochimaru knew that neither his own life nor B's life would be enough to force the Reikage into submission. If he wanted to force a surrender, he had to do what he did with Raza, threaten the entire village. And sure enough, after hearing Orochimaru's words, the fourth Raikage hesitated. The army surrounding them was overwhelming and unstoppable. He didn't care about himself but his subordinates. Damn it, even Raikage-sama can't. Lord Raikage. Is there really nothing we can do? The Kumo shinobi looked up at Orochimaru, who could launch a devastating attack at any moment, their nervousness and despair growing. They had originally planned to rely on the chakra cannon to hold the line and protect Kumogakure's final defenses. But now, their plan had completely failed. And Orochimaru had destroyed it so casually. What was that sphere? Why was the explosion so powerful? And that shield, it's completely impenetrable. The Kumo shinobi had finally realized the truth. Against Orochimaru in his six paths form, those without Super Kage level strength couldn't even stand, let alone fight. For the average shinobi this was a battle beyond comprehension. Raikage, are you still hesitating? Orochimaru's faint smirk never wavered. Kumogakure is already surrounded on three sides. Your trump card has been destroyed. If I take you down and launch just a few tailed beast bombs into your village. He didn't finish the sentence. But the fourth Raikage understood. Kumogakure wasn't just shinobi, there were civilians in the village as well. If he was defeated, and tailed beast bombs were launched into the village, followed by a full-scale invasion, Kumogakure would be completely annihilated. Boom! Before he could make a decision, the two-tailed beasts had already arrived at the outskirts of Kumogakure, controlled by Pain. Meanwhile, the clone army commanded by Danzo had finished eliminating the last scattered Kumo shinobi and had also begun closing in on the village. The pressure surrounding them was now unbearable. As the fourth Raikage hesitated, Orochimaru landed on the ground, using a flying thunder god kunai as his marker. Without saying a word, he summoned a coffin. This is... No. No way. It's the previous Raikage? Father? The fourth Raikage was momentarily stunned. Then, his rage erupted. Bastard! Orochimaru, I'll kill you! Whoosh! In a flash, the fourth Raikage disappeared, moving so fast that only an afterimage was left behind. The third Raikage, reincarnated through Edo Tensei? At that moment, the fourth Raikage's mind reached its own conclusion. Orochimaru must have been the one who killed his father. Impulse overpowered reason, he would make Orochimaru pay. Old grudges and new hatred. Settled in blood. Yet, just as his fist was about to strike, a massive figure blocked his path. Son, don't be reckless. Father, you. The fourth Raikage, known for his unyielding toughness, suddenly felt his emotions spiral out of control. The third Raikage, due to some special circumstances, I cannot control your mind. Orochimaru spoke casually. Take your time and talk. I'll be outside, waiting for your decision. Without waiting for a response, Orochimaru vanished from the scene. Is Edo Tensei an evil jutsu? No. Its reputation as an evil technique came only from the fact that it required a human sacrifice. Aside from that, Edo Tensei was an incredibly useful ability. Not only could it reduce casualties in war, but it could also reunite the living with their deceased loved ones. Now, letting the third Raikage and the fourth Raikage settle their unfinished matters, this was the current situation. Whoosh! 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 At Kumogakure's western front, countless figures landed behind the two-tailed beasts. Orochimaru, how's the situation? A clear voice called out. Hearing it, Orochimaru slowly turned. 4 figures had arrived. Tsunade, Mikoto, Minato, Sakumo. Their gazes first landed on the two-tailed beasts, then turned toward Orochimaru. Orochimaru smiled faintly. It's over. Over? Tsunade was momentarily stunned. You mean... Kumogakure surrendered? Yes. For Kumogakure, there were only 2 choices. 1. Surrender. 2. Be annihilated. As a Kage of a great nation, the Reikage could only choose the first option. Then prepare the troops. We're taking over Kumogakure. Minato and Tsukumo were still in disbelief. But their doubts lasted less than an hour. Because soon, the fourth Reikage arrived. With B, his bodyguards, and his secretary at his side. He walked directly up to Orochimaru. And said, Orochimaru, you win. Chapter 367, the fourth Reikage spoke calmly, but his tone was filled with helplessness and unwillingness. As a Kage, failing to protect his village was a pain that only a few could understand. There had always been a delicate balance between the five great nations. Even though their military strengths varied, any attempt to capture another village would ultimately result in heavy losses for both sides. But now, Orochimaru's overwhelming power had completely shattered that balance. Everyone had anticipated this possibility, but despite their best efforts, they had been powerless to stop it. Even when they had joined forces to hunt Orochimaru down, they had failed completely. And as for why the fourth Reikage surrendered? Before launching his attack on Kumogakure, Orochimaru had already shown the third Reikage the full extent of his forces. So, the third Reikage understood exactly what they were up against. Konoha's elite shinobi, an army of clones, tailed beasts, and even Akatsuki's most dangerous criminals. The sheer scale of Orochimaru's power had driven the third Reikage to despair. The strength of the Six Paths was far beyond the realm of ordinary shinobi. And in this era, without saviors like Naruto and Sasuke, Orochimaru was simply unstoppable. A Kage was expected to risk their life to protect their village. But when the power gap was so insurmountable, was it worth throwing their lives away in a hopeless battle? That would be nothing but foolishness. If there had been even the slightest chance, the fourth Reikage would have fought to the end. But in this situation? That would be pointless self-destruction. Orochimaru, who understood human nature all too well, had played his strategy perfectly. Rather than forcing surrender directly, he had first convinced the third Reikage to accept the reality of their situation. Then, the third Reikage had conveyed this understanding to his son, making it easier for the hot-tempered fourth Reikage to accept defeat. And of course, the most crucial factor was Orochimaru's promise. If Kumogakure surrendered, he would spare the lives of its shinobi. This was the same promise he had made to the third Reikage before his death. The third Reikage knew that given Orochimaru's power, there was no need for him to lie to a dead man. So, for the future of Kumogakure, he had chosen to compromise. The Kumo shinobi felt frustrated and humiliated seeing their once proud Reikage forced to bow before someone else. But the truth was undeniable. They could not defeat Konoha. They could not defeat Orochimaru. Reikage, you. Enough. The fourth Reikage raised a hand, cutting off Tsunade's words. Victory and defeat are absolute, Hokage. My life is in your hands. Lord Reikage. Damn it. Brother! The fourth Reikage's unwavering surrender left B and the others seething with anger and humiliation. If they could, they would gladly take his place. But they knew. Shinobi from a defeated village are never trusted. And in a conquered nation, if someone had to be sacrificed, the first to go would always be the Kage. Tsunade turned to look at Orochimaru. For some reason, despite being strong-willed and decisive, whenever Orochimaru was present, she instinctively sought his opinion. Orochimaru, noticing her gaze, smirked. Don't look at me. Just make your decision. No matter what you decide, I'll support you. Oh? Tsunade was briefly stunned, then let out a small, moved smile. You really are something. Taking a deep breath, she turned back to the fourth Reikage. For now, go back to your village. There was no question, Tsunade could not kill the Reikage. Because if she did, it would only provoke a violent backlash from the remaining Kumo shinobi. That would be more trouble than it was worth. Taking control of Kumogakure had to be done carefully. After all, conquering the ninja world was far easier than governing it. Force alone could help one conquer nations. But to rule them? That required far more than just power. Managing the newly conquered Kumogakure was now a major challenge. From what Orochimaru remembered, history showed that after a victorious conquest, the entire military of the defeated nation was often wiped out. Even those who surrendered had grim fates. In other words, the most loyal and defiant shinobi of Kumogakure would need to be executed. But doing that would never be something Tsunade would accept. Nor would Konoha. So, Orochimaru left the matter to her. He trusted that with Tsunade's abilities, she would find a way to handle the situation. As for the fourth Reikage, he returned to Kumogakure with B and his loyal followers, preparing to convince the rest of the village to surrender peacefully. Watching him leave, Tsunade suddenly asked, "Orochimaru, what's the situation in the other countries?" She knew that Kumogakure was not his only target. Orochimaru responded calmly, "No need to mention the small nations. Among the 5 great nations, only Iwagakure remains." "Oh? So Iwagakure is the only one left? What about Sunagakure?" "Raza has already surrendered. Once you're ready to take over the village, you can head there anytime." His casual tone stunned Tsunade and the others. Sunagakure surrendered? When did that happen? Before they could even process the information, Orochimaru had already left. Kirigakure's Mizukage had already allied with Orochimaru. Sunagakure and Kumogakure had been forced into submission. News of this shook the entire shinobi world. And in Iwagakure. Upon receiving the news, the IWA shinobi realized their fate was sealed. They knew they were next. As the Tsuchikage, Inoki had considered every possible countermeasure. But when he personally witnessed the battlefield, he understood Orochimaru's overwhelming power. An army of Jonin-level clones. Akatsuki's most dangerous shinobi. And the man standing in his way, his own mentor, the second Tsuchikage, resurrected through Edo Tensei. Every single force they faced was beyond troublesome. Inoki stood atop the highest rooftop, staring into the distance. Is this truly the fate of the ninja world? He had always known that Orochimaru would be the one to break the balance. But he never expected this day to come so soon. Boom! A massive explosion shook the outskirts of Iwagakure, sending a mushroom cloud into the sky. Inoki didn't even flinch. He knew. Now that Kumogakure had fallen, Orochimaru would be coming for Iwagakure next. Taking a deep breath, he turned to his son. "Kitsuchi, come with me. We're going to meet the man they now call a legend." Chapter 368, Outside Iwagakure, a dense crowd of people stood gathered. With Kumogakure having announced its surrender, Orochimaru naturally mobilized all his forces here. So, present here were not only the tailed beasts and the clone army but also representatives from other villages. Yahiko stood as the representative of Amigakure, while Tsunade represented Kanagakure. It could be said that various forces of the ninja world had converged in this place. The nuclear bomb-like explosion just moments ago had been a tailed beast bomb, unleashed by the Nine Tails under Orochimaru's orders simply for amusement. In truth, Orochimaru could have easily crushed any village with his own strength, especially when supported by the Akatsuki and the tailed beasts. The reason he involved Tsunade was merely to have more people available for governance and administrative work after their inevitable defeat. Otherwise, to ensure smoother control, Orochimaru might have resorted to extreme methods, such as the large-scale execution of enemy shinobi. After all, as Orochimaru once told Tsunade, only through death can one eliminate the risk of betrayal. From Iwagakure, Inoki flew out with his son Kitsuchi and a group of guards, his face pale with shock as he gazed at the formidable army before him. He had anticipated this moment, but the sheer size of the force and the obedient tailed beasts still caught him off guard. As the distance closed, Orochimaru's pale face and long, flowing hair came into view. "Orochimaru, as expected, you're the one standing at the top in the end," Inoki said, his tone heavy. The moment he had tried and failed to kill Orochimaru, barely escaping with his life, Inoki had foreseen this outcome. No need for small talk. Orochimaru's lips curved into a faint smile. "You know the situation. So, Inoki, will you fight or surrender? The question was blunt, leaving no room for ambiguity. The decision was Inoki's to make. Do I even have a choice? Inoki replied with a bitter smile. Orochimaru had mastered Edo Tensei, commanded an army of clones, and controlled all 9-tailed beasts. With his 6 paths level strength and the Akatsuki's combat power at his disposal, who could hope to stand against him? Certainly not a Wagakure. The image of Orochimaru easily dismantling his Jintan, Genkai Hakuri no Jutsu remained vivid in Inoki's mind. You're right. Orochimaru's voice remained casual. Death might not frighten a Kage, but knowing your decisions led to your village's destruction. That's a weight no Kage wants to bear. Indeed. Inoki's eyes darkened. But before I surrender, Orochimaru, I want to ask one thing. Go ahead. What do you intend to do with the Wagakure? Sorry, but I can't answer that. It's a decision for you to make. For us to decide. Precisely. Since you've agreed to surrender, I'll be straightforward. Orochimaru paused briefly. In a month, a summit will be held in the Land of Iron. The Kage and leaders of every village are expected to attend. I see. Then I'll be there, Inoki said with resignation. Good. Let's go. With that, Orochimaru gave a simple gesture, and his vast forces began withdrawing in an orderly fashion. Nagato had once sought to use the tailed beasts to resurrect the Ten-Tails and subdue the world through fear. Now, Orochimaru had achieved the same feat but with far greater power. He had captured all 9-tailed beasts, commanded both the clone army and the Edo Tensei army, and held the full strength of Konoha as his foundation. Faced with such an overwhelming force, the other villages had no choice but to surrender. The news of Wagakure's surrender soon spread like wildfire across the ninja world. With all 5 great villages submitting to Konoha's dominance, the next step was to decide how this new world order would be governed. To that end, Orochimaru had arranged the upcoming Kage Summit. This was not a typical Gakujin 5 Kage Summit. It was, in fact, a global ninja summit, heralding the dawn of a unified shinobi world. The meeting was scheduled for September 1st, year 53 of the Konoha calendar, in the Land of Iron. Why choose the Land of Iron? Because it was the only nation that had consistently remained neutral throughout the ninja world's conflicts. Orochimaru needed a third-party witness to legitimize the meeting's outcome. The Land of Iron, with its perpetually snowy climate, was governed by samurai rather than shinobi. Its culture, authority, and military strength remained independent from the villages of the ninja world. Mifune, the leader of the Land of Iron, would serve as the summit's presiding official. In the past, Kage summits had been called only in times of major disputes or critical decisions. But this time, attendance was mandatory. 2 historical summits stood out in memory. The first was the initial Gakujin, attended by the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama. At that summit, Hashirama had proposed the equal distribution of tailed beasts among the great nations to maintain balance and prevent war. While initially skeptical, the other Kage were eventually moved by Hashirama's sincerity, and the agreement brought a temporary end to the era of constant warfare. The second was the summit before the Fourth Great Ninja War, called by the Fourth Reikage after believing Sasuke had killed B. That summit had originally been intended to demand accountability from the other Kage for harboring Akatsuki's rogue ninjas. However, Obito's sudden appearance and declaration of war turned the meeting's focus toward forming the allied shinobi forces. This time, however, the summit was not convened out of conflict or necessity. It was Orochimaru's declaration of a new world order. While the notice came from Konoha, the true mastermind was Orochimaru. His goal was clear: the complete and irreversible unification of the ninja world. As the days passed, villages hurried to make preparations. 10 days before the summit, Kage from the various nations began traveling to the Land of Iron, each accompanied by their most trusted guards. They all understood one thing. This summit would bring about an earth-shaking transformation to the world as they knew it. Chapter 369, the 5 Kage Summit traditionally requires 1 Kage and 2 guards per village. However, in the current situation, such formalities have become irrelevant. After all, Orochimaru has attained the power of the Rakudo, 6 paths. Against him, Jinjutsu, Ninjutsu, and Taijutsu are meaningless. Unless one wields the same power, they aren't even qualified to harm him. So, regardless of how many guards each Kage brings, they would be nothing more than decorations. In light of these circumstances, a one Kage, one guard arrangement was adopted for the summit. The Land of Wind. The sun blazed mercilessly, casting waves of heat through the air. The wind carried sand across the village entrance, forming swirling clouds of dust. Standing at the gate and looking back at the shinobi of Sunagakure, Raza couldn't help but sigh. No wonder the village was utterly helpless against Orochimaru. Aside from himself, was there anyone here with decent combat abilities? Even when choosing his bodyguard, Maki had been the only viable candidate. Not much of a choice. What about Chiyo? How could he possibly bring an elderly woman to serve as his bodyguard? Maki, let's go. Yes, Kazekage-sama. Be careful on the road, Kazekage-sama. Captain Maki, safe travels. Maki waved dismissively. All right, head back. Maki was an elite jonin of Sunagakure, trusted by Raza and known for his strategic prowess. He was a crucial figure for the Land of Wind. As Raza walked away from the village, Maki followed closely behind. For the Kazekage, Raza brought Maki. The Tsuchikage, Anoki, traveled with his son, Kitsuchi. The Reikage, brought along the white-haired Darui. The Mizukage, Terumi Mei, was accompanied by the one-eyed Ao. As the summit day drew near, these figures began arriving one after another in the Land of Iron. The Land of Iron. Snowflakes drifted gently from the sky, covering the ground in a thick, white blanket. The air was frigid, and silence filled the atmosphere. Surprisingly, the first Kage to arrive wasn't the Hokage, despite Konoha's proximity. Instead, it was Raza of Sunagakure, who had departed earliest. Standing at the gate of the Iron Fortress, Maki, unaccustomed to such cold weather, rubbed his arms and sneezed loudly. So cold! The climate here is the complete opposite of ours. A man stood at the gate, an older figure with his head wrapped in bandages, accompanied by 2 guards. Hearing Maki's complaint, he responded in a calm, steady voice. I've been waiting for you. I am Mifune, General of the Land of Iron. Despite his long beard, Mifune looked sharp and alert. Thank you for receiving us. Raza adjusted the hood of his robe and greeted him with a calm expression. Please, come in and have some hot tea. Follow me upstairs. Raza nodded, and he and Maki followed Mifune into the fortress. Outside, the snow continued to fall, turning the world into a sea of white. Meanwhile, in the snow-covered woods, a pair of figures walked arm in arm. From a distance, they might have been mistaken for a couple out for a stroll. Behind them trailed a third figure, cloaked in a robe. Orochimaru tilted his head upward to watch the snow. For a moment, he considered reciting a poem but realized he had long forgotten the verses he'd once memorized. A sudden sneeze broke the silence. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow and turned to the woman beside him. Did you catch a cold? He asked, almost instinctively. The question caught Tsunade off guard. Her heart warmed at his rare display of concern. She smiled and shook her head, pulling her robe tighter. No, just a bit of an itch in my nose. Orochimaru nodded. I thought so. With your physique, you shouldn't be affected by the cold. Thanks to her sage body, illness was practically impossible. Besides, Tsunade was a medical ninja who knew how to care for herself. Getting sick under these circumstances would be absurd. Tsunade leaned against Orochimaru's arm, smiling softly. You're right. By the way, Orochimaru, do you think this summit will really bring peace to the ninja world? Orochimaru's expression didn't change. You already know the answer. There will always be conflict. He paused. But with proper management, most wars can be prevented. Proper management, huh? Do you have any ideas? Tsunade's eyes held a glimmer of hope. Her respect for Orochimaru had grown significantly. This man had forced the great villages into unconditional surrender. Orochimaru shifted his gaze toward her, then smiled faintly. There's a way, but it takes time. If only. If only what? Tsunade's curiosity was piqued. She turned to look at him, noticing his slightly dazed expression. What's wrong? Nothing. I was just thinking. Tsunade raised an eyebrow but didn't press him. Instead, she turned around and waved at Uchiha Mikoto, who was following behind. Meanwhile, Orochimaru's thoughts raced. He had been about to say, if chakra didn't exist in this world, much of the conflict would disappear. In his view, chakra gave individuals power beyond what ordinary people possessed. That power bred ambition, conflict, and war. If no one had chakra, there would be fewer reasons to fight, fewer opportunities to commit crimes. Wasn't that precisely what Kaguya had attempted to do? She had tried to absorb the world's chakra through the Shinju, divine tree, leaving herself as the sole wielder of that power. In theory, if she ruled over a world of powerless individuals, wouldn't peace naturally follow? Was Kaguya a villain, or a misunderstood savior? Perhaps she had recognized that distributing chakra among humanity would only cause chaos. Maybe her methods were radical, but her intentions, logical? If that were true, then her philosophy directly opposed the teachings of the Rakudo Sennin. Orochimaru exhaled slowly. Why am I even thinking about this? Let's unify the ninja world first. With that thought, he turned to Tsunade and abruptly pulled her into his arms. Caught off guard, Tsunade tried to speak but found her lips sealed by a sudden kiss. The cold air around them seemed to vanish in that moment, replaced by the warmth they shared. This feels like our first time together. Chapter 370, wait, what are you doing? Mikoto is still here. Tsunade quickly broke free from Orochimaru's grasp, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she glared at the man's mischievous smile. I didn't see anything. Mikoto exclaimed, raising her hands to cover her eyes in an exaggerated gesture. Orochimaru wiped his lips with the back of his hand, the corners of his mouth curling into a wicked grin. Mikoto said she didn't see anything, so what's the problem? That doesn't make it okay, you bastard. Tsunade scolded, flustered. So suddenly, and in the middle of the wilderness? It's not like it's the first time we've done it in the wilderness. You! Tsunade's expression shifted between frustration and amusement. She was annoyed that Orochimaru could be so brazen, acting intimately without regard for time or place. But at the same time, she couldn't help but smile. Since Orochimaru left the village, his plans and actions had become enigmatic. Even as his lover, she rarely understood his true thoughts. Only in moments like this did he feel close to her again. The Land of Iron. By the time Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Mikoto arrived at the Land of Iron's main city, a full day had passed. Standing at the entrance of the city was a bearded man clad in samurai armor, his posture upright, his eyes sharp. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes and smiled faintly. The Land of Iron's general. Mifune, I presume? Tsunade glanced at Mikoto and gave her a subtle nod, signaling her to greet their host. Orochimaru had traveled across the world in his youth but had never visited this nation, given its unique neutrality. Thus, this was his first encounter with Mifune, the Hokage of Konoha, and Orochimaru of the legendary Sannin. I've heard of your reputation for many years. Mifune's voice was steady and respectful as he made a gesture of invitation. Please, come inside. We have hot tea prepared. Despite Orochimaru's status as a former Konoha missing nin, the world at large believed his defection had been a ploy orchestrated by Konoha's top brass. Now, with his overwhelming strength and his marriage to the Hokage, Mifune knew better than to underestimate him. Thank you for your hospitality. Orochimaru responded politely, exchanging a few more pleasantries before stepping forward. The armor these samurai wear looks quite unique, Tsunade remarked as she walked alongside him, observing the heavily armored guards stationed nearby. Unlike ordinary samurai, these men wore thick, full-body armor with protective helmets. Orochimaru gave a slight nod, about to respond when a voice suddenly called out behind him. Orochimaru-sama. Please wait! Startled, Orochimaru turned around to see a woman with long brown hair and blue eyes approaching. She wore a stylish, form-fitting blue dress beneath a thick cloak to guard against the cold. Terumi Mei? The Mizukage greeted Mifune with a nod before stepping closer, Ao trailing behind her. Her eyes briefly flicked toward Tsunade. Orochimaru-sama, Hokage-sama, fancy meeting you here under these circumstances. Tsunade's gaze shifted to the Mizukage hat Mei held in her hands. Her lips curled into a smile. Mizukage-sama is too kind. Hearing the formal address, Mei faltered slightly, sensing the subtle distance in Tsunade's tone. Orochimaru, noticing the shift in atmosphere, quickly interjected. It's freezing out here. Let's head inside and talk. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked toward the city gates, Makoto following silently. Mei hesitated for a moment, then exhaled softly and followed suit, her footsteps crunching against the snow. Inside the iron fortress, the warmth was a welcome relief from the harsh cold outside. As they entered the main hall, Orochimaru felt a sharp pinch at his waist. He winced and turned to the culprit. Why did you pinch me just now? He asked, his voice low. I felt like it. Tsunade smiled sweetly, her tone casual. Orochimaru sighed, then smirked. His eyes flicked toward Mei, who lingered behind them. Haha. Are you jealous? Of you? Don't flatter yourself. Ask Makoto if she believes you. Orochimaru's smile widened. It's funny. You were the one who sent Makoto to my bed, yet now you're jealous over something this trivial? You! Shut up! Tsunade hissed, her cheeks turning crimson. Orochimaru let out a soft chuckle, clearly enjoying her reaction. 3 days later, the summit. The conference hall in the Iron Fortress was spacious and dignified, far larger than the typical venue used for a 5-Kage summit. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ground in white. Inside, the air was warm and heavy with anticipation. The room featured a large U-shaped table with more than a dozen chairs, each seat marked by a banner representing its respective village. Alongside the 5 great nations, fire, water, wind, earth, and lightning, there were banners for smaller villages like Odo, Aim, Kusa, Taki, Yuki, and more. In total, 16 villages were present. Orochimaru represented Odo Geikure, while Yahiko attended as Amageikure's leader. Though the smaller villages had been invited, their role was merely symbolic. The true decisions would be made by the 5-Kage. A smaller table was positioned in the open space at the center of the U-shape, reserved for Mifune, the neutral party overseeing the summit. As the clock struck the appointed time, Mifune rose to speak. Please place your Kage hats on the table. The 5-Kage followed his instructions, each removing their respective hats, marked by the kanji for fire, water, wind, earth, and lightning, and placing them on the polished surface. Tsunade sat at the head of the table, with the other Kage arranged beside her in descending order of their village's influence. Raza, Anoki, and Mei all straightened their postures, ready for the proceedings to begin. Still, Anoki, and Raza couldn't hide their curiosity. Kirigakure chose her as Mizukage? Mei's name was unfamiliar to them. And Yahiko, a young, blonde-haired boy, was representing Amageikure? Hadn't Hanzo of the Salamander ruled that village? Despite their confusion, none voiced their thoughts aloud. Mifune cleared his throat and addressed the gathering. In response to the Hokage's call, we have gathered here today to discuss the future of the ninja world. His voice was measured, his expression solemn. I am Mifune, General of the Land of Iron, and I will be presiding over this meeting. A heavy silence settled over the room as the gravity of the occasion set in. The primary purpose of this summit is to determine how best to manage the ninja world going forward. To that end, I invite each of you to share your thoughts. The Ninja World Summit had officially begun. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 14. Peace.